Welcome to the Fantasy Audiobook. Marvel's King of the Undead. Chapter 41. Wayne was a little depressed and sat alone in the last row of seats. He chose this seat because it was covered by the sun and other students might feel a little hot. But for some reason, Wayne always likes to bask in the sun when he has nothing to do recently. He thinks this is because he has been locked up in that dark laboratory for so long that he now has a special preference for sunlight. Feeling the sunshine gently covering his body, a sense of inner satisfaction appeared in Wayne's heart. It's so nice to lie down lazily like this, Wayne couldn't help but think as he was lying on the desk basking in the sun. Ignoring the teacher's voice on the podium, a somewhat bored Wayne began to look at his classmates. The little fat man was chatting animatedly with another fat man of similar stature to him. It was easy to infer from the way they kept swallowing saliva and the light shining in their eyes that they were discussing delicious food. A girl of similar age sitting directly in front of Wayne successfully attracted Wayne's attention because there was a furry tail behind the girl, waving under the bench. When curious baby Wayne was about to reach out to grab it, suddenly a small fireball as big as a fist appeared on a boy's hand diagonally in front of him. The fireball rotated flexibly around the boy's hand. While the boy was showing off his skills triumphantly, another burst of coldness suddenly came from behind him. In an instant, the originally active fireball turned into a ball of ice exuding cold air. Just when the ice puck was about to fall, a cloud-like air mass of condensed water vapor suddenly appeared, catching the falling ice puck in time. I saw a little girl with eyes not far away staring at two naughty male classmates, and then whispered, "Attention teacher, you two idiots." Looking at the group of students around him, Wayne suddenly felt that none of his new classmates were serious. A smile appeared on the corner of his mouth, and Wayne muttered to himself, "I'm kind of starting to like it here." Jingle bell. As the bell rang, the originally peaceful classroom suddenly exploded. The little fat man walked towards Wayne with his new friend. "Hey Wayne, this is my new friend." Looking at Wayne lying lazily on the desk, the little fat man said happily. Like Wayne, the little fat boy felt an inexplicable kindness as soon as he came to this class. Looking at the peers who were similar to him around him, the little fat boy felt like he was at home. "Hello, fatty." Looking at the two fat men who were also chubby, Wayne said hello to the two fat men. As for who the big fat guy is, needless to say, he must be the little fat guy. "Don't use random nicknames, Wayne." The little fat man glanced at Wayne helplessly and began to introduce his new friend. The little fat man's new friend is called Liao, a native of Zhejiang, China. It is said that he awakened his superpower because he didn't know what additives he ate when eating at home. After awakening his superpower, Liao suddenly lost weight from 200 pounds to 108 pounds. Although China does not reject mutants, Liao's rapid weight loss still frightened his parents. His parents tried their best to find out about Xavier School for the Gifted through various channels and connections. Although they were reluctant to send their son to a foreign country thousands of miles away, for the sake of their son's health, the couple still did it. This painful decision. "This is 108 pounds. Looking at the fat man in front of him with some surprise, Wayne exclaimed, "Well, that was before, and now I'm back to the 200-pound range." Looking at the surprised Wayne in front of him, Liao shyly touched his big belly, and then explained to Wayne, "After I came to the academy, I found out through examination that the reason why I lost so much weight was because my stomach was connected to a different dimension. Before, I couldn't control my abilities, so the food I ate was not actually absorbed by my stomach. By absorbing it, you enter that unknown space. So can you control your stomach now? What's the use of your ability?" With a clear nod, Wayne understood the reason for his sudden weight loss. After all, no matter who doesn't eat at all, he can lose weight very quickly. Mentioning his ability, Liao said with some embarrassment, "Except for the different dimensional space in the stomach, my esophagus does not seem to be harmed in any way, and my mouth seems to have mutated and can produce suction." "So what?" Wayne continued to ask. "So, I can now eat a large pot of scalding hot pot in an instant without worrying about burning myself." As Liao spoke, he swallowed his saliva subconsciously, as if thinking of all kinds of delicious food. "You have." Wayne was just about to say "What's the use of your ability," when suddenly he caught sight of the little fat man looking at Liao with envy, and he immediately closed his mouth. If you think about it carefully, this ability seems to be quite useful when grabbing food. At this moment, other students in the class also gathered around. After all, Wayne, the new classmate, had not introduced himself yet, and everyone also wanted to get to know this companion who they would be getting along with day and night. Hey, my name is Bob and my power is ice. Nice to meet you. I saw the boy who Wayne had paid attention to in class just now walked over to Wayne and said to him. As he spoke, he made an ice sculpture in the shape of Wayne and handed it to Wayne. Looking at the ice sculpture in front of him that looked exactly like him and the enthusiastic classmates around him, Wayne decided that it would be better to introduce himself formally, since after all, he would have to get along with each other in the future. Hello, my name is Wayne, I came here with Steve, my ability is immortality. Speaking of abilities, Wayne suddenly became a little confused. How should he describe his abilities? Super strength, super vision, super hearing, super perception, super recovery, super intelligence. Seeing the envy on the faces of the students around him after hearing about his abilities, Wayne suddenly felt that he was too good. He had so many abilities, and if he reported any of them, he would be the envy of others. Does immortality mean you can always be this young? Suddenly, the female classmate wearing glasses and summoning Youngwoo looked at Wayne's face with envy and said, Yes, your skin is really good. Before Wayne could answer, another girl who had been flirting with Wayne answered and reached out to touch Wayne's face. Wayne, who was still narcissistic just now, suddenly felt a little confused. Why did he feel that what others envied and what he was proud of were not the same thing? Was he being teased? Feeling the warmth on his face, Wayne thought to himself a little shyly, it turns out that one of his abilities is to be super handsome. When Wayne was being surrounded by girls in his class, he suddenly felt that the air around him suddenly became hot and hot. Turning around, he saw that the boy who was playing with fireballs in class summoned his little flame again. After attracting everyone's attention with the flame in his hand, he looked at Wayne with his peripheral vision and said, What's so strange about a pretty boy? Glancing at the stick figure in front of him, Wayne lowered his head again. Could it be that such a perfect self had encountered the most vicious school bully in the legend? Seeing Wayne's reaction, the boy increased the temperature of the flame, laughed and said, Look, only strength is what a man should pursue, not being a cowardly pretty boy. Seeing the nearby classmates frowning, Bob stretched out his hands to the boy. A burst of ice visible to the naked eye spread rapidly in the air, quickly approaching and extinguishing the fireball in the boy's hand. That's enough, John. Looking at the ice balls falling to the ground and the angry John, Bob spoke. Humph. After giving Bob a hard look, John turned and returned to his seat. Sorry, John's temper has always been like this. Bob took the initiative to sit down next to Wayne and said to Wayne, It's okay. It's said in the book that ugly people tend to cause mischief. He just envied my super good looks. Seeing the stickman sitting in his seat and constantly looking back at him, Wayne smiled and said. The school's recess time was not long. 10 minutes later, Raina walked onto the podium again. He looked at the pieces of broken ice on the ground near where Wayne was sitting and could vaguely see the shape of fireballs. A glimmer of understanding flashed in his eyes. He smiled slightly and said below. It seems that everyone is getting along well with the new classmates. Next, we will explain the current situation of mutants in various countries. As we all know, except in China where mutants are treated equally, mutants in other countries are subject to various types of oppression. Listening to the boring knowledge on the podium, Wayne leaned sideways on the desk, supporting his head with his left hand, and secretly took out his mobile phone from his pocket with his other hand, relying on the desk to block the teacher's sight on the podium. The hand holding the mobile phone tapped the screen a few times, found a book called The Encyclopedia of Pranksters, and started studying it carefully. Although he was very generous on the surface, privately, Wayne would not let the arrogant match man go so easily. Although he has offended himself, he must be able to convince others with virtue and use the knowledge he learned from books to educate him and let him know that knowledge is the foundation of power. The day ended quickly. After dinner, Wayne and Little Fatty brought their new friend Liao to their room. Hey, Wayne, John's gonna give you some trouble. Liao sat on the single sofa next to the bed with some frustration, feeling the pressure of the armrests on both sides of the sofa on his buttocks. He looked at Shanyu lying on the bed with some worry and said, John's status in Xavier Academy for the Gifted is somewhat similar to that of Joseph in the orphanage. Perhaps because John's ability is to control flames, his character is as violent as a ball of fire. He is also a person who pursues extreme power and likes to be in the limelight. Today, Wayne's appearance suddenly attracted the attention of most of the girls in the class, which made John, who likes to be the center of attention, feel neglected. Although it sounds silly, most teenagers aged 16 or 17 should have this mentality, especially when you have an ability that you think is cool. Ha ha ha, Liao, it's him who should be worried. On the other side of the bed, the little fat man was looking at his mobile phone and couldn't help laughing when he heard Liao's words. Ever since he was young, Fatty had never seen Wayne suffer a disadvantage from his peers. Liao didn't know Wayne very well, but the little fat man knew Wayne's true strength. John's little flame did not pose any threat to Wayne at all. Liao, are there no physical education classes or courses to help you train your abilities in school? The motionless Shanyu finally turned over on the bed. Looking at Liao sitting on the sofa, Wayne felt a little sad for the sofa in his room. Wayne has been thinking since he came back that since this is a school composed of mutants, it will definitely be different from ordinary schools. If only some situations and basic knowledge are explained every day, what will happen to these mutant children? What a help! Well, this is possible. Teacher Storm will teach us how to control our abilities, and Teacher Cyclops will teach us how to use some abilities. Having said this, Liao paused, thought for a moment and then continued. But since someone came here, the school sometimes organizes us to have some competitions. Of course, the competitions are divided into two types, one is the combat group and the other is the logistics group. Interestingly, after a day, Wayne discovered that the students in the school had an almost crazy love for nicknames. It seemed that everyone wanted to give themselves a nickname. And many times they call each other not by their own names, but by each other's nicknames. For example, the Liao in front of me has a self-titled Big Eater, not the Fat Eater as Wayne said. Learn. After hearing Liao's answer, Wayne gained a new understanding of the school's education system. This is what a mutant school should look like. The previous courses are all designed to allow students to better familiarize themselves with and control their own abilities, while the competition mentioned later can better enable mutants to apply what they have learned. After all, abilities must be put to use in the end. Otherwise, no matter how powerful your abilities are, it will be in vain if you can't use them in practice. So who proposed this competition? Since it was after coming here, it proves that this person is not from the school. Wayne looked at Liao curiously and asked, Fatty, who is this person you are talking about? Hey, you can call me Big Eater, let me see, the teachers seem to call him Wolverine. After Liao Ming thought hard for a long time, he spit out a name from his mouth with some uncertainty. Suddenly hearing the name from Liao's mouth, a light flashed in Wayne's lazy eyes. Wolverine. Ignoring the two fat men's continued exchanges, Wayne muttered the familiar name in a low voice. The first time I heard this name was when he was tortured by Francis. Later, Wayne specially dragged the little fat man to learn about this person in detail on the internet. It is said that he has the same self-healing ability as himself. Ever since the World War hundreds of years ago, his story has been circulating around the world. Why did he leave? The little fat man asked, gossiping. He, it is said that he has helped the school a lot, but he has some differences with Teacher Cyclops. You know the specific reason. Mentioning these gossips, Liao suddenly laughed obscenely and gave the little fat man a, you know what, look. After being stunned for 2 seconds, the little fat man suddenly realized that in addition to talking about food with him in class today, Liao also talked about a lot of school gossip. At this moment, the player on the little fat man's cell phone suddenly turned on, and a singing voice came out. Expecting a good fortune and a shock. What a wonderful encounter. Over the top of the mountain and layers of white clouds ahead. Where is the green light? Quote, rolling his eyes, Wayne asked Liao. Second Fatty, will he come back? Not bothering to correct Wayne on what he called himself, Liao said. He comes back every game. Nodding silently, Wayne began to look forward to the academy competition. Early the next morning, Wayne was awakened by the sound of the little fat man getting up and rubbed his sleepy eyes. Last night, Wayne read a book until dawn. Dragging his tired body, Wayne got up out of habit and followed the little fat man to the classroom. Just like his previous life in the orphanage, Wayne seemed to have acquiesced in his identity as a student of Xavier Academy for Gifted Students. Professor. One hand worked hard to support the head that kept nodding. While listening to Lena's hypnosis on the podium, Wayne tried hard to fight against the sleepiness. Suddenly, a fluffy tail appeared in Wayne's field of vision. Wayne, who was about to close his eyes, subconsciously widened his eyes and glanced at Raina on the podium. Seeing that she didn't notice this, he quickly reached out and grabbed the tail in front of him. What? A piercing scream suddenly sounded in the originally quiet classroom, and a dozen students who were lying on the table and having a sweet dream suddenly raised their heads at the same time. One of the male students wearing glasses seemed to be suddenly awakened and received some stimulation. Suddenly, the paper that was sitting quietly on the desk seemed to be summoned. It began to float from the desk, like an elf dancing in the wind. In an instant, the whole classroom was filled with pieces of paper flying everywhere. Bruce, stop. Raina, who was giving a lecture, dropped the textbook with only the cover left in her hand, rolled over and collapsed from the podium, and patted Bruce on the shoulder. However, pieces of paper are still flying all over the sky. This student named Bruce has not been in school for a long time, so he has insufficient control over his own abilities. In this case, the more anxious he was to stop the paper, the more happily the paper flew. The pieces of paper that were still fluttering in the wind began to move faster and faster, and some of them could even leave shallow marks when they hit the wall. At this moment, a piece of paper that was originally floating upward suddenly changed its direction of flight and shot towards the dazed little fat man below like a dart. While the little fat man was stunned, Liao suddenly stood up. He opened his mouth hard towards the sky. A strong suction force suddenly came from his mouth, and the paper flying towards him seemed to have encountered a magnet. The magnet instantly sank into Liao's mouth, but Liao did not close his mouth. Instead, he held the desk with both hands and controlled his mouth to generate greater suction. Suddenly, the originally aimless pieces of paper flew towards Liao's mouth. When these A4-sized pieces of paper came close to Liao's mouth, it was as if the space had been compressed. They instantly became the size of a fingernail, and were then swallowed by Liao. As the last piece of paper entered Liao's extended mouth, Bruce's mood finally stabilized. You didn't even let go of the paper, fatty-er. Suddenly, there was an exclamation from the last row of the classroom. At this time, Raina and other students remembered that the screams seemed to come from the back of the classroom. For a moment, everyone turned to look at the culprit in the last row. Under the reproachful eyes of everyone, Wayne suddenly realized something, subconsciously raised his right hand and said to the angry people, "It's all her fault. It's not my fault." I saw Wayne holding his furry orange tail in his right hand. The owner of that tail was a chubby orange cat. At this time, he was struggling to bend up and scratch the hand holding his tail with his fleshy claws. However, because Wayne was holding him upside down and the orange cat had too much fat on its belly, its several attempts failed. Seeing the fat orange cat showing its teeth and claws hard at him, Wayne couldn't help but laugh out loud. However, just as he smiled, Wayne suddenly remembered the current situation, put away the smile without any trace, and said to the orange cat with a serious face, "Why are you yelling in class? Do you know that doing so will have a serious impact on the discipline of the class? You can't delay others if you don't learn. You must know that you waste 1 minute of one person's time. For the one people in the class, it was a waste of 45 minutes. Wayne, please put down the meow. One more thing, there are 67 people in our class." Raina looked at the orange cat who struggled even more under Wayne's criticism and walked towards Wayne. Raina took the orange cat from Wayne, who had a sneer on his face, and placed it on the desk next to her. As soon as its 4 paws touched the table, the orange cat jumped up and off the table at a speed that was very inconsistent with its fat body, and then transformed into the girl with a tail under Wayne's surprised gaze. Looking at Meow, who was hiding behind Raina with an angry look on his face, Wayne couldn't help but sigh in his heart. The world is really full of wonders. Although Wayne knew that mutants had various abilities before, he never had ever thought that someone could turn into a fat cat. Looking at the messy classroom, Raina had to terminate today's class. After telling everyone to move freely, she led the 3 problematic characters Wayne, Meow, and Bruce towards Professor X's office. Ahem, so what happened today was an accident. Listening to Wayne's explanation, Professor X suppressed his smile and looked at the people in front of him. Miaoji looked aggrieved, Bruce was obviously nervous, Lena was angry, and Wayne deliberately imitated Miaoji's aggrieved expression. An invisible mental wave appeared from the professor's body and instantly covered the entire office. The three people who were originally in different moods felt that their moods suddenly relaxed. Even Rena, who originally wanted to file a complaint, couldn't help but smile inwardly when she thought about her purpose. Wasn't what Wayne did exactly what every naughty little boy would do? There was nothing worth being angry about. Seeing the calm expressions of the three of them, Professor X breathed a sigh of relief subconsciously. As the principal of Xavier Academy for the Gifted, he needs to personally resolve many major and minor issues in the academy, especially such trivial conflicts between students. Fortunately, his powers are very good at dealing with such disputes. Thinking of this, Professor. I think this. However, while the professor was speaking, Wayne thought about it for a while and felt that he had indeed affected other people this time. As a man, of course he had to be brave enough to act. She immediately acted like a wronged wife who had been abandoned by her husband, and said pitifully, I admit that I have some responsibility, and I am willing to accept the punishment. Just let me stay away from other students and set up a special seat. Just forget it. The words fell at the same time, and Wayne and Professor X also looked at each other in tacit understanding. How could I forget that Wayne is not affected by me? This is what Professor X is thinking at the moment. Wayne looked at the professor who had just finished speaking, and then at the three people who had calm faces and seemed to have no objections to the professor's solution. Although he was unclear about the situation, he still said hurriedly, I take back what I just said, and I support you, Professor. Ahem, since you admitted it, then do as you say. After giving Wayne a helpless look, Professor X decided. What am I doing this for? At this moment, Wayne really felt aggrieved from the inside out. Looking at the three people leaving the office, Wayne looked at Professor. What else do you want to say to me? After just announcing the outcome of Wayne's treatment, Professor X asked Reina and the others to leave first, leaving Wayne behind. I found that you have some problems getting along with others. Looking at Wayne in front of him, Professor X said tactfully. Through understanding Wayne's previous experiences and his performance today, Professor X found that Wayne was very bad at getting along with others. For so many years in the orphanage, Wayne only had one friend, Little Fatty, which explains the problem. After hearing Professor X's words, Wayne did not answer. Regarding his own shortcomings, he actually understood that this was one of the negative impacts of the orphanage on him. Expand your social circle, this is my advice to you. Seeing that Wayne did not answer, Professor X gave Wayne some suggestions, and then controlled the wheelchair and walked out of the office. After coming out of Professor X's office, Wayne went straight back to his dormitory. How to expand your social circle? As they walked, Wayne thought about this question. As soon as he opened the door, he saw two fat figures lying in front of the computer in the dormitory. Big Fatty, what are you looking at? Suddenly, Wayne asked curiously. This is Instagram, a social software. Liao replied while continuing to look at the computer. Why is this social app full of sports cars and beauties? Wayne walked to the computer and looked at the pictures of luxury cars and beautiful women on the computer. Below, a group of people were commenting and liking, asking Liao. Don't you even know this? Liao turned around and looked at Wayne in surprise. His expression was clearly complaining about Wayne's ignorance, but he still explained. The content I read is all content posted by people I follow. Now these are all Chinese students introduced to me by my parents. As he said that, he casually clicked on one of the people's homepages. I saw that person posting 1 or 2 posts every day, and most of the content was photos of himself with luxury goods and luxury cars. How did you end up hanging out with these rich second-generation people? Wayne looked at the fat man's attire in front of him, a standard otaku 3-piece suit, black-rimmed glasses, a plaid shirt, and baggy jeans. There was also a half-drunk bottle of fat otaku happy water on the table. Cough cough. Seeing Wayne's unabashed look, Liao certainly understood what Wayne was thinking. He exited the interface just now, clicked on his homepage, and then gave the mouse to Wayne. Wayne clicked on a photo at random and saw a fat man with a yellow face lying on a very high-end looking yacht basking in the sun. Swipe the mouse to the right, and you still see the fat man who looks a little wretched, but in this picture, the fat man seems to be sitting in a private jet, holding a glass of champagne in his hand. Is it true that the second fat man is so rich? It's exactly what the book says, real people cannot be judged by their appearance. Wayne looked at the fat man in front of him with a shocked expression. Looking at the shocked Wayne, Liao Zhang snatched the mouse back and said proudly, "Hey, Wayne, this is nothing to us, look at this." As he said that, Liao entered Tony Stark's name on it, and all of a sudden, various pictures of Tony showing off his wealth without thinking appeared. How many fans does he have? Looking at the pictures in front of him and the countless comments below, Wayne suddenly asked. Well, let me see, 7912. Looking at this astonishing number of fans, a trace of envy flashed in Liao's eyes. He is indeed the ancestor of our generation. Can I chat with the people who left these messages? Looking at the dense messages under each photo, Wayne's eyes suddenly lit up. Isn't this the best way to expand your social circle? Communication on social networks is also communication. Of course can. Liao rolled his eyes at Wayne. Hey, Steven, sign up for an account for me. Handing his cell phone to the fat man next to him, Wayne felt that he was an activist. Now that he had thought of it, he would start doing it. How to attract fans in general. Looking at Liao who looked like he was an old player, Wayne asked. Ha ha ha, this is the right person to ask. I am a man with 4 fans. Generally, I just publish some interesting content. Although showing off wealth is just one of them, the effect is good, but... As he spoke, Liao glanced at Wayne, who exuded the aura of poverty, slapped his mouth, and said in his heart, "How dare you despise me?" At this moment, the little fat man returned the phone to Wayne. Wayne picked it up and took a look and saw that the profile picture on it was a photo of himself, but it did not affect his handsomeness at all. Nodding with satisfaction, ignoring Liao who was fuming with just 4 fans next to him, Wayne directly took his cell phone and lay down on his bed. Well, pay attention to Tony first. After finding Tony in the search bar, Wayne clicked follow, then clicked post. After flipping through the few photos on his phone, Wayne's eyes suddenly lit up. Why did you forget this? I saw Wayne clicked on a photo. Although Wayne's hair was messy, his smile was very bright. The background was dark, and directly under Wayne was a silver steel armor. After selecting this photo, Wayne randomly applied a filter and took a look at Tony Stark. The comment above said, "A great two-way experience for me and Tony." Click, publish, done. At the same time, Tony, who was continuing to upgrade his armor on the first floor of the villa, suddenly heard Jarvis prompt. Mr. Stark, Wayne just registered an Instagram account and posted a photo. After Wayne went to Xavier School for the Gifted, Tony asked Jarvis to keep an eye on Wayne's various activities. Well, let me see. Putting down what he was doing, Tony raised his head and clicked in the air. A holographic projection screen suddenly appeared in the air that was originally empty, and what was displayed on it was Wayne's Instagram homepage. Ha ha ha, I was the first one to pay attention to him. This guy has quite a conscience. Seeing that the only person following Wayne in his attention column was himself, Tony couldn't help but feel a little relieved. However, the next moment, when Tony clicked on the picture posted by Wayne, the smile on his face suddenly stiffened. Jarvis, didn't I want you to delete this photo from his phone? Tony's roar echoed in the lab. Sorry, Mr. Stark, due to Steven's ability, I cannot delete the photos on Wayne's phone. As early as after returning that day, Tony secretly asked Jarvis to hack Wayne's phone and delete the photo. However, Wayne's cell phone has always been maintained by Fatty. As the king of the hacker world, how could Fatty let Jarvis succeed? So after discovering Tony's intention, Fatty in turn prevented Jarvis from reporting back to Tony. Behavior. Only then did this precious photo, which had commemorative value and was later called The Friendship Between Iron Man and Wayne, by countless media around the world, appear in the public eye for the first time. In the blink of an eye, 2 months have passed away silently like sand tightly grasped in the hand. In the past 2 months, Wayne and Tony often mocked and attacked each other on Instagram, causing the number of fans to exceed 100 and becoming a veritable internet celebrity. Of course, Wayne believes that the rapid growth of his fans is all due to his charisma and has nothing to do with the vulgar Tony. At school, Wayne has become involved with most of the students, except for Pyro John, of course. Although Wayne's seat became a special seat, many of Wayne's methods of retaliating with kindness had no time to be used on John, but this did not prevent their relationship from continuing to deteriorate. At this time, Wayne and other students were standing on the school playground under the bright sun. Everyone already knows the trick. Next, everyone needs to improve their control over their abilities through continuous practice. Storm stood in front of everyone and shouted to the students below. Her tight sportswear outlined her charming lines. Now let's start free practice. Following Storm's order, the originally neat queue dispersed, each finding an area on the playground to practice their abilities alone or in teams. Wayne, did you not take a shower again yesterday? The moment they were dismissed, the little fat man trotted to Wayne's side and asked, looking at Wayne's messy hair blowing in the wind. Since Wayne's Instagram followers exceeded 1 million, the little fat man suddenly discovered that Wayne seemed to have become an internet-addicted teenager who was addicted to the internet and couldn't extricate himself. He held his mobile phone all day long, either reading books or browsing Instagram, and sometimes even took a shower. Don't wash. This made the little fat man, who was his roommate, a little bit intolerable. Steven, do you know that clothes can be divided into washed and dry cleaning? Glancing at the little fat man, Wayne asked. I know, but what does this have to do with you not taking a shower? The little fat man looked confused. Then do you know what bathing means? Feeling the sunlight surrounding him, Wayne temporarily put down his phone and squinted his eyes. Just taking a shower. The little fat man was even more confused. If you want to change the topic, you don't have to change it so bluntly. Then do you know what it means to bathe in the sun? Faced with Wayne's 3 inexplicable questions, the little fat man became a little impatient. Isn't it just for basking in the sun? Don't change the subject. Oh, I'm ignorant. Bathing in the sun means bathing in the sun. It's commonly known as dry cleaning. Seeing that the foreshadowing was almost done, Wayne laughed disdainfully and looked at the ignorant fat man with disdain. Quote. Looking at Wayne, who was getting thicker and thicker in confusion, the little fat man was speechless for a moment. He just didn't want to take a shower, but he could come up with such a reason. The internet is really harmful. After muttering under his breath, the little fat man turned around and prepared to find Liao Lai to soothe the wounds in his soul. Looking at the little fat man who returned without success, Wayne's narrowed eyes flashed with a hint of pride. The corners of his mouth turned up slightly, and he couldn't help but feel grateful to Professor X in his heart. The professor is right. Expanding the family's social circle does have some unexpected gains. Wayne is not as aloof as Tony on the internet. He will reply to almost every fan's message one by one. This is why he doesn't even have time to take a shower. The dry cleaning theory just now was learned by Wayne from a communication with a fan. Wayne, the school's annual competition starts next month. When Wayne was about to continue dry cleaning, Storm, who had left, suddenly appeared next to Wayne. Yeah, I know. Wayne nodded, wondering why Storm wanted to tell him this. Then why don't you find an opponent to practice with? Storm pointed at the many students on the playground who were working in pairs and using their abilities to compete. I never bully the weak. Seeing the various abilities attacking each other on the playground, Wayne suddenly looked up at the sky, looked at the clear sky, and imitated the appearance of an expert in the world and said, "Wouldn't it be a fool to rush to fight when the sun is out?" Wayne raised his head and rolled his eyes at an angle that Storm couldn't see. However, the next moment, a huge figure appeared behind Wayne, shrouding Wayne in shadow. "You're blocking my sunshine," Wayne subconsciously complained to the person behind him and slowly turned his head. Wayne's eyes flashed for a moment. The man who appeared behind him was about 2 meters tall, with strong muscles evenly distributed throughout his body. The strangest thing was that his whole body was made of bright silver metal, which reflected dazzlingly in the sun of light. "I will be your opponent. You can call me Colossus." Is he really powerful? Looking at the unattractive Wayne in front of him, Colossus glanced suspiciously at Storm, who brought him over. In his opinion, Wayne was just a pretty boy, and he was a little worried that he would make him cry with one punch. "Hey, what are you talking about, Tai Biao Dao?" Seeing Colossus' suspicious eyes, Wayne was a little unhappy. Do you know where the last Tai Biao Dao who was against me is now? Oh, where is it? Seeing Storm nodded in confirmation, Colossus asked with some interest. Humph, drift away with the wind. Wayne imitated Wade's mean look and made an exaggerated move. Although Wayne always mocks Wade for his meanness, it cannot be denied that this gesture has a very effective mocking effect. Come on and try it. Colossus shouted angrily. Taking advantage of his height, he stretched out an arm about the same thickness as Wayne's waist and grabbed Wayne below. You asked for this, Flash Man, you forced yourself to be wiped out in ashes. Standing on the spot, Wayne took a faint step and easily dodged Colossus' grasp. The current Wayne is not the newbie he was back then, although his previous words were a bit pretentious. However, although the attacking methods of those young students on the playground looked very powerful, in Wayne's opinion they were indeed trash. Seeing Colossus grabbing the air, Wayne turned around and grabbed Colossus' thick arms with both hands, and threw the steel giant, who was more than 2 meters tall, into the air with an over-the-shoulder throw. It wasn't until he flew into the sky that Colossus realized something. He never thought that this body that looked as thin as a pretty boy actually contained such huge energy. When Wayne grabbed his arm and threw him into the sky, he had no room for resistance. Looking at Colossus who was about to land on the ground, Wayne had no intention of letting go of this thick-skinned sandbag. Wayne hasn't fought with anyone in this period of time, which makes his hands feel a little itchy. After finally encountering a human-shaped sandbag that seems to be indestructible, he won't be polite. Kicking off the ground with his right leg, creating a spider web on the ground, Wayne's whole body rushed towards Colossus' landing point like a cannonball. Boom! A loud sound echoed in the playground, like the sound of the huge bronze bell in a Buddhist temple being struck by tourists, instantly attracting everyone's attention. Colossus, who was still in the air, saw a black shadow rushing towards him quickly. The next moment, a huge force hit his defenseless chest. The body that was about to land instantly changed its direction and flew towards the sky again. Looking at Wayne who appeared directly below him and was about to continue to kick him away, Colossus endured the pain in his chest and relied on his strong body to forcefully change his posture in the air. When Wayne started to kick him away again, for a moment, he accurately pinched Wayne's raised leg with both hands, and his feet finally touched the ground. Colossus grabbed Wayne's leg, exerted force on his waist, and lifted Wayne in his hand. After spinning around him twice, it was thrown like a shot put. Wayne, who was thrown out, did a somersault in the air and landed firmly on the ground. You're too slow, Flashman. Wayne shook his dizzy head, looked at Colossus who was rubbing his chest in pain, and suddenly laughed and mocked. You're very good. I'm going to get serious next time. Seeing the unharmed Wayne, Colossus lowered his body, like a sumo wrestler, and quickly approached Wayne with long strides. What? With a loud shout, looking at Wayne who was standing there without dodge, Colossus put his hands on Wayne's seemingly thin shoulders. Just as he was about to use his strength to lift the pretty boy in front of him, he found that his hands suddenly sank. It turned out that Wayne's legs were slightly bent and he made a movement similar to a horse stance. When Colossus pinched his shoulders with both hands, Wayne also raised his hands and put them on Colossus' arms. Come and show your strength, big man. Although with Wayne's speed, he can easily dodge Colossus' attack. But the warm-up just now made Wayne's fighting spirit a little higher. Against such a powerful player with high attack and defense, it would be too boring to defeat him with speed. What Wayne wants is to defeat his opponent in the strongest aspect, so that the big man who despises him will have a long memory. After Wayne put his hands on Colossus's arms, his 5 fingers instantly exerted force, like 10 strong nails, nailing Colossus's arms. After making sure that the opponent couldn't get rid of his hands, Wayne used both arms at the same time, making Colossus' attempt to lift himself instantly come to nothing. Feeling the huge pressure on his arm, Colossus frowned and looked at Wayne opposite him with some surprise, who seemed to want to compete with him for strength. He simply stopped thinking about getting rid of Wayne's fingers and used all his strength to engage in a stalemate with Wayne. In an instant, the two people who were still flying around in the sky suddenly became quiet. Their eyes met, and both sides secretly tried their best to overwhelm the other in terms of strength. At this moment, Liao, who was standing in the distance watching the excitement, suddenly ran over with his mobile phone, stood opposite Wayne, and raised his mobile phone. Crack! Looking at Wayne's slightly red face, tense facial muscles, and gritted teeth on the phone, Liao nodded with satisfaction. Then I sent it directly to my IN's homepage with one click, and after touching Wayne, I clicked send with satisfaction. By relying on Tony Stark's popularity, Wayne gained 100 followers in 2 months. Liao had long been envious of this fact, but there was nothing he could do about it. Who told others to have a good relationship with Tony Stark? Looking at Wayne, who looked constipated at this time, Liao suddenly had a thought. He really couldn't match Tony's popularity, but at this time Wayne also had 100 fans. Compared to himself, who only had 4, he was considered a big figure. When Liao was happily preparing to take the second photo, he suddenly felt the murderous look in the eyes of the model he was taking. Subconsciously looking at the shattered ground beneath Wayne's feet, Liao decisively took back his phone, looked at the sky, and said nonchalantly, "The weather is great today." Then they quickly evacuated the scene. "You are done." Looking at the fat man slowly walking away, although he didn't know what he had captured, Wayne could tell with his butt that it was definitely not his handsome side. Turning back to look at Colossus, the culprit who was also constipated, Wayne said angrily. Then, Wayne no longer held back, shrugged his shoulders, and broke away from Colossus' control. Taking advantage of the gap when Colossus retracted his arm, Wayne took a step forward and punched Colossus in the chest again. The huge force destroyed the balance of Colossus' body, and while he was scrambling to prevent himself from falling, Wayne's attack struck again. After kicking Colossus in the heel, Wayne punched Colossus as the empty door opened. This time Colossus could no longer maintain his balance and fell backwards. However, at the moment when he fell backward, Wayne rushed forward and kicked him again, moving him back 1 meter in the air. Then he quickly followed up and added a kick just before he landed. In just 10 seconds, the original stalemate was instantly broken by Wayne. The students in the entire playground were stunned as Wayne, who was 1 meter tall, defeated a steel giant who was over 8 meters tall. At this moment, Colossus, who was being attacked crazily, was even more miserable. He can't hit the ground at all. Every time he is about to hit the ground, Wayne's attacks will make up for it on time, so that he can only be hit by floating in the air endlessly. And as the number of Wayne's attacks increased, he flew backward faster and faster. Finally, after Wayne kicked Colossus 38 times, Wayne, who had finished venting his anger, finally stopped pursuing. And the poor Colossus flew backwards for a full 10 meters, and finally hit the wall of the playground, and completely collapsed in the rubble of the wall. It seems that I still need to exercise occasionally. Wiping the sweat from his forehead, Wayne took a deep breath of comfort. After 2 months of a salty life, Wayne suddenly discovered that occasionally sparring with such a straightforward big man was an effective way to relieve stress. "Hey, are you okay?" Seeing Colossus lying motionless in the gravel, Wayne ran over with some worry. What would happen if such a good sandbag was broken? Fine. After speaking out 2 words with some difficulty, Colossus tilted his head and fainted. Looking at Storm walking over from the other side of the playground, Wayne explained with some guilt. He just said he was fine. After briefly looking at the wounds on Colossus, Storm looked at Wayne in surprise and said, "It's really nothing serious. You are very strong." Only then did Storm understand why Professor X valued the young man in front of her so much. You must know that he is only 16 years old now. It seems that he has not yet attacked with all his strength, but the Colossus who is already able to fight has no power to fight back. Storm suddenly remembered what Wayne said in Professor X's office, and couldn't help but look forward to the future of her mutants. Watching Storm skillfully summon a small tornado to lift the unconscious Colossus towards the infirmary, Wayne lay down leisurely in the human-shaped pit that Colossus had just created. Feeling the natural ergonomic chair, Wayne narrowed his eyes with satisfaction. The other students who stopped to watch the excitement on the playground also began to practice again. Suddenly, the playground became noisy again, and all kinds of abilities bloomed in every corner of the playground again. In a corner of the playground, a little boy who always carries a camera even recorded the scene of Wayne's battle just now and is sharing it with the surrounding students who did not see the whole battle. After a while, Fatty and Liao ran to Wayne. "You were so cool just now, Wayne." Carefully hiding his cell phone, Liao flattered Wayne, who narrowed his eyes. This means that people should not be judged by their appearance. Wayne looked at the flattering Liao in front of him, glanced at him, and keenly noticed the mobile phone in his hand, and was about to discuss the matter with him. Have you ever killed anyone before? Suddenly, Liao said something. After being slightly stunned, Wayne nodded and asked, "Why do you ask this so suddenly?" "Well, I just felt something different from your battle just now." With that said, Liao pointed to the other students on the playground. The abilities of these people seem gorgeous and colorful, just like setting off fireworks, but every time I watch them attack each other, it feels like playing house. After a pause, Liao recalled the scene where Wayne and Colossus were fighting just now. He seemed to be hesitant and continued. "And when you fought Colossus just now, I felt all the hairs on my body stood up. This is the way a man should fight. I heard that Colossus has participated in several operations with the teachers and has seen blood, so I told you before, there is no need to worry about Wayne's safety at all." Before Liao could finish speaking, the little fat man who was immersed in playing with his mobile phone suddenly interrupted. The little fat man currently has blind confidence in Wayne's combat effectiveness. After all, he is the person in the academy who knows Wayne's abilities best. In the little fat man's opinion, even if Wayne encounters someone he can't beat, he can tire the enemy to death with his incredible recovery ability. What action to take part in? At this time, Wayne's attention was attracted by Liao's words. "Don't you know yet?" Patting his forehead, Liao suddenly remembered that Wayne and Fatty didn't seem to know anything about the X-Men, so he explained. "The teachers are all members of the X-Men. Sometimes some outstanding students will temporarily join the team and become reserve members of the X-Men. Whenever someone or an organization threatens mutants or the school, the professor will send out the X-Men to chop off those people's extended claws." Speaking of this, there was undisguised envy in Liao's wretched little eyes. It seemed that joining the X-Men was a very honorable thing for him. "Have you ever participated in an operation? Or pang?" Wayne slowly sat up from the recliner, holding his chin with his right hand, and looked thoughtfully at Liao, who had a passionate face. No, only the X-Men can participate in the operation. We ordinary students can only hide in the escape tunnel when we are in danger." The corner of Liao's mouth twitched for an instant, and his whole mind was instantly pulled back from fantasy to reality. His originally passionate tone became a little depressed as he answered. "His ability is really a bit disabled, and it is not of much use except for eating fast and acting as a vacuum cleaner. I have applied to Professor Thought. He could only hide his passion in his heart silently." The scene where he just watched Wayne defeat Colossus in a devastating way suddenly aroused the passion hidden in his heart. "I couldn't help but imagine in my heart that I had the ability like Wayne, and successfully became a member of the X-Men, fighting at the forefront of the human race and contributing to the future of mutants. However, fantasy is full and reality is skinny." Liao lowered his head and did not see the ground under his feet. A plump belly occupied his entire field of vision. The little fat man patted Liao's shoulder. He could completely sympathize with Liao's thoughts. When a boss died, he also hated his own incompetence extremely, and kept blaming himself in his heart for why he could only hide in the basement like a useless mess. This may be a sign of sympathy. Looking at the depressed Liao, the little fat man seemed to see himself a few months ago. "How about you join my team?" Liao, who was trying hard to tighten his stomach, hoping to see the ground, suddenly heard Wayne say. He raised his head subconsciously, and there seemed to be a glimmer of hope in his eyes. "What team? With so many mutants, the X-Men alone are definitely not enough to solve all the problems, so I want to form a small team to handle various difficult and complicated diseases." Speaking of his team, Wayne finally regained his energy, and his whole demeanor changed, like a salted fish that had turned over. "Who else is in the team?" "Steven and I, and a very good international mercenary, who is also now a mutant." After unconscionably breaking Wayne seemed to feel that this attraction was not strong enough, so he thought for a while and continued. "And Tony Stark, who is our technical advisor. Do you have any requests?" Hearing Tony Stark, Liao's expression changed slightly and his tone became a little urgent. Tony is really a golden sign. Silently observing Liao's attitude before and after, Wayne couldn't help but think about what else he could do with Tony's tiger skin. "Wayne, I need a little membership fee." After coming back to his senses, Wayne shamelessly brought up the dues system that had not been successfully implemented at Wade's place in the face of the little fat man's surprised expression. I don't have much money right now. Hearing this, Liao suddenly panicked. After knowing that Tony Stark had joined the team, he couldn't wait to become a member of the team. But since I came to the United States, I have never had a place to use money, so I didn't ask my parents to transfer money to me. I'm not in a hurry for this little money, I only need 1,000. After some time, I will provide 1,000 million US dollars as the team's activity fund. Liao suddenly shouted loudly. After a fierce inner struggle, Liao decided to take out all the private money he had saved over the past 10 years. Originally, Wayne wanted to say $1,000 to join the membership, but before he could finish, he was angrily interrupted by Liao Hao. Thinking of the yachts and private jets he saw on Liao's Instagram, Wayne suddenly remembered the true identity of this fat man from Zhejiang, China. According to this method, as long as he recruits a few thousand team members, wouldn't he be richer than Tony? Suddenly, Wayne subconsciously ignored Liao's previous photo taking of himself, wondering how satisfied this new team member was. You will be a member of our team from now on. After wondering for a long time, Captain Wayne finally made a decision. Then, he lay back on the natural recliner with a satisfied look on his face. I have told everyone a truth with my actual actions. Even if a salted fish turns over, it is still a salted fish. However, before Wayne could find a comfortable position, he was pulled up again by Liao. Captain, what do we need to do next? Liao, who had just joined the team, felt like he was getting some blood. At this moment, he wanted to go out and have a big fight right away. Ah, what do you want to do? Looking at the energetic new team members in front of him, Captain Wayne was a little troubled by being forcibly pulled up. He wanted to get angry but couldn't find a suitable reason. After all, someone had just made a huge sum of money, and at this time he seemed to be actively working. As the captain, I couldn't say to him, "Don't make any noise, your captain wants to take a nap now. I want to contribute to our team." Let me think. His originally beautiful eyebrows were knitted into a frown. Wayne was thinking about the countless books he had read in his mind, thinking about how to deal with the overly excited team member in front of him. It seems we are still short of people. After a long time, Wayne said tentatively and looked at the reactions of his team members. There is really no other way. Wayne once read a book titled How to Get His Men to Do Things for Him Willingly, but he really has not read the book How to Get His Men to Be Lazy and Leave Me Alone. We can look for it in the school. After hearing the captain's instructions, Liao thought for a moment and got an idea. Indeed, after all, everyone in the school has superpowers, which is much more convenient than looking for them outside. After being reminded by Liao Wei, Wayne also reacted. Instead of looking for some well-trained ordinary people outside, it is better to form a superpower team yourself. I believe that under his wise leadership and effective training, this superpower team of his own will be able to surpass Professor X's X-Men. Do we need to tell Professor X? Watching the heated discussion for 2 days, the little fat man suddenly interjected. After all, this is still Professor. I'm going to give him a hint that the wise Captain Wayne is going to select some of his teammates from his school. Do you want him to be prepared to entertain them? Wayne quietly made a gesture of taking out money, then shook his head, looking at the little fat man who hated the iron and said, "Stephen, we have been eating and drinking here for free for 2 months. I can't bear to ask the professor for money again." After a pause, Wayne lowered his voice and said, "If it doesn't work, go and ask for it." When faced with such a captain, the little fat man felt helpless. At this moment, a heat wave suddenly came from the playground in the distance, interrupting the conversation between Wayne and others. Immediately afterwards, a girl's scream sounded again from that direction. Following the sound, the 3 Waynes saw the boy named Bruce, whose whole body was covered with flames. He was lying on the ground with a face of pain, rolling around, trying to extinguish the flames on his body. The one who screamed was the furry-tailed Meowth, who was looking anxiously at Bruce, who was covered in fire. Time goes back half an hour. John was working hard to increase the temperature of the flame he summoned. Suddenly a bell rang not far away. The mental power was suddenly dispersed, causing the summoned fireball to fluctuate inside, and then dissipated in the air. The angry John turned his head and saw Wayne, who was fighting with Colossus. With a trace of surprise in his eyes, John was about to watch Colossus beat Wayne up, but he was shocked to find that the result was different from what he expected. Wayne beat Colossus back step by step, and finally kicked him unconscious. Seeing the students around him whispering in private, discussing how powerful Wayne was, John felt an uncontrollable irritation coming from his heart. Subconsciously clenching his fists and looking at the leisurely Wayne, John began to roar crazily in his heart. Why does that pretty boy have so much power? Why would Colossus, who had become a temporary X-Men, be beaten so hard by that pretty boy that he was unable to fight back, while he was not even qualified to become an X-Men? Suddenly, John turned his head and looked in the direction of Professor X's office. It's all because this old man didn't give himself a chance to improve his strength. Every time he wants to find a way to improve his power, this old mutant man will use his strange ability to influence himself and let his consciousness be driven by him. Let yourself lose the opportunity to become a strong person. As he thought about it, John felt like his whole body was on fire, just like his own abilities. I can control fire. I was born to be strong. Taking out the lighter from his pocket, John pulled out the small ball of flame created by the lighter. Under the hot sun, John completely let go of control over his abilities and obeyed the bursting flame in his heart. Let it burn. Seeing that the small flame that was originally the size of a fingernail quickly turned into a large fireball with a diameter of 1 meter under his control, John couldn't help but smile wildly. Sure enough, I shouldn't listen to that old man. The more I suppress my abilities, the weaker I will be. Power should never be controlled. As John unleashed his abilities without reservation, the fireball slowly turned into a 3-meter-high flame tornado. As the flames grew, John became more and more irritable. Suddenly, John glanced and saw the boy in the corner controlling the paper to fly around in the sky. At this time, the restlessness in my heart was like a demon that had broken through the seal, whispering seductively in my ear. Come on, John. Kill him. Prove to Professor X that you are the strongest. Weak people don't deserve to live in this world. What? With a roar in his mouth, John completely lost his mind, controlled the strongest flame he had ever formed, and flew towards the paper boy over there. Bruce, who was practicing his control skills, suddenly felt that the moisture in the air seemed to be evaporated in an instant. Dry air mixed with hot waves swept towards him. After stopping the practice, Bruce turned his head and looked in the direction of the heat wave. A fire tornado almost twice his size was sweeping towards him. Without enough time to dodge, Bruce subconsciously used his new ability, turning his entire body into paper that could float in the wind, hoping to speed up his movement and avoid the flames. However, Bruce seems to have forgotten that what G fears most is fire. The moment Bruce transformed into a paper man, his entire body began to turn yellow, turn black, and burn. At this moment, the firestorm that caused all of this finally came to Bruce. The orange cat, who had been hiding on the branches to take a nap in the shade, was also awakened by the sudden heat wave. He closed his eyes and arched his fat body, stretched out, and rubbed his paws comfortably on the tree trunk. Jumping down from the leafy tree, the blazing light shrank the orange cat's pupils into a thin line. When he looked closely, he saw Bruce struggling in the flames. Meowji was suddenly frightened and turned back into a human body, letting out a piercing scream. Soon, the movement here attracted everyone on the playground. Bob, put out the fire quickly. Among the crowd surrounding him, Meowji instantly spotted Bob, who had just arrived. Let me try. Bob walked right through the crowd. Exposing his hands to the air, a trace of white smoke emitted from Bob's hands. Then the air began to slowly move closer to Bruce, who fell to the ground, and the sudden coldness dissipated some of the heat in the air. Bob did not dare to directly control the cold air to contact Bruce's body, so he could only lower the surrounding temperature to control the fire. After all, the human body is too fragile. If it is directly icicled, although it can quickly extinguish the flames, the blues inside will also become pieces of minced meat. At that time, everyone can pick up the fragments above, mark the blues fragments on them, and collect 99 fragments to synthesize a complete blues. Everyone give way. At this moment, Professor X finally arrived with Storm, Beast Hank and other teachers. After pushing aside the crowd in front of her, Storm's black pupils suddenly turned white, and the surrounding air seemed to have found its owner. Under Storm's control, a hurricane formed, instantly extinguishing the flames on Bruce's body. Looking at Bruce, who was lying limply on the ground, most of the skin on his body was burnt black, and he was unconscious. Hank, originally wearing a pair of gold-rimmed glasses and dressed like a gentleman, suddenly transformed into a huge blue beast with blue skin. Gently carrying Bruce onto the stretcher that had been prepared, the blue beast firmly held the stretcher with both hands and quickly took him to the school's medical room. John did it. Looking at the remaining traces on the ground, Professor X's face no longer had the kind smile of the past. Although the tone was still gentle, Wayne, a melon eater among the crowd, clearly noticed that the atmosphere on the playground had become significantly heavier with the arrival of Professor X, and it seemed that the air had condensed. It was as if there was a huge rock pressing on everyone's chest, making it hard to breathe. Yes, that's him. I saw it too. John controlled a fire tornado and attacked Bruce. As soon as Professor X finished speaking, several students who rushed to the scene immediately responded. They were not far from John and Bruce at the time and witnessed the entire incident. "Where's John?" Wayne stood on tiptoe and looked among the crowd, but did not see John. Except for a few mutant big men in the academy, Wayne's height is still very advantageous. Just now, everyone's attention was completely on the injured Bruce, completely ignoring the culprit John. "He has escaped from the school. Professor, act immediately to bring John back." Tapping his fingers on the wheelchair, Professor X's voice suddenly appeared in the minds of Storm, Jean, and Cyclops. Although Xavier Academy for the Gifted is hidden in a mountain forest, it is actually not far from New York. If an out-of-control fire mutant appeared rashly in such a big city, it would cause a large number of casualties. If used by someone with intentions, it would even destroy the balance that Professor. What's more, John also injured his companion in the academy. Although Professor, looking at the three people leaving quickly, Professor. The invisible spiritual power is like a wisp of wind blowing through everyone's heart, and the original uneasiness, anger, panic and other emotions in their hearts instantly dissipate. Seeing that the emotions of all the students had stabilized, Professor. "Everyone, please go back to your dormitory. Bruce will be fine." Where did that John go? After returning to the dormitory, Wayne asked the fat man next to him. "I don't know, there is no surveillance in the school." Looking at his phone, the little fat man replied helplessly. In order to create an atmosphere of freedom, no monitoring equipment is installed in Xavier Academy for the Gifted except for a few special places. The little fat man can only check the surveillance around the road outside the college that leads directly to the city. But John just lost control and was not demented. He would not be stupid enough to run away on the road. Looking through the window at the students returning to the dormitory one after another, and thinking of Bruce who had been burned beyond recognition just now, Wayne suddenly felt inexplicably depressed inside. Is it because the companions you live with are injured in front of your eyes, while others seem to have nothing happened? Wayne thought silently in his mind. Last time in Professor. This time, the mood of everyone on the playground suddenly stabilized, which confirmed Wayne's own guess. Although Wayne also understood that Professor. But looking at the students below who were talking and laughing as if nothing had happened and the little fat guy who had started playing games as if nothing had happened, Wayne suddenly felt that he should do something. "I think we need to do something." Wayne spoke to the two people in the room. "The X-Men will definitely be dispatched for this kind of thing. In principle, students cannot run around privately to avoid causing bad effects." Liao, who was crowded on the single sofa, heard Wayne's proposal and suddenly felt eager to try it. However, thinking of the 3 X-Men who left early and the teacher's instructions, I suddenly hesitated. At this moment, Liao was like a good student who had maintained good class habits for a long time. Suddenly he heard a classmate suggest that we skip class and go out to play. The good student was a little moved, but the long-standing principles made him more hesitant. "We don't have good control over our abilities and may hurt others," Liao continued, as if looking for some reasons to support his decision. "What will happen if you lose control and eat all the trash in Times Square?" Looking at Liao who looked hesitant, Wayne joked, then turned to the little fat man and said, "Steven, send a message to everyone in the class. Our team is going to start recruiting people. Time, in an hour. Location, our dormitory. Objective, catch the John." After the little fat man sent the message, the three Waynes began to make some adjustments to the layout of the dormitory. Moving the two beds away, Wayne put the original computer desk together with a desk in one hand. There are 3 benches placed near the table near the window, and a large sofa placed near the door. After Wayne directed Erpang to post a note written by himself on the door of the dormitory, Wayne took out a pair of glasses from nowhere and put them on his face. He sat down in the middle of the 3 benches and poured himself a glass of wine. Had a cup of coffee. At this moment, a petite figure suddenly appeared in the corridor outside Wayne's bedroom. Looking at the crookedly written name of the team registration office on the white paper in front of me, the tail behind the figure couldn't help but wag a few times, as if hesitating, but finally knocked on the door. Bang bang bang. Open the door quickly, fatty. Hearing the knock on the door, Wayne put down the coffee in his hand, sat up quickly, and motioned to the fat man next to him to open the door. Hey, it's you. After Erpang opened the door, Wayne looked at the petite Miaoji in front of him in surprise. Miaoji sat down on the sofa awkwardly, and the sofa that could barely fit Lao's butt seemed extremely wide at this time. Under the gazes of the 3 people, Miaoji whispered, "I'm here for an interview, well, to apply for a job." Ahem, interview and application mean the same thing. Why do you want to join us? After a brief surprise, Wayne quickly entered the role and looked at the first interviewer in front of him with a serious face. Because Bruce is my friend. Mentioning Bruce, Miaoji, who was a little shy at first, forgot about his shyness and said loudly, Okay, what is your dream?" Looking at the irritated kitten in front of him, Wayne couldn't help but smile. Dream. Miaoji was stunned. Wayne's question was too jumpy. What is your dream? A picture subconsciously appeared in Miaoji's mind. A bloated orange cat twisted its fat buttocks to find a piece of clean ground in a shady open space and went there. After licking the long hair on his body with satisfaction, a variety of delicacies suddenly appeared on the originally empty ground. After enjoying the meal, the orange cat rolled on the spot a few times, and finally fell asleep with its head leaning on a soft doll that appeared out of thin air. Eat, drink, and sleep. Subconsciously, Miaoji uttered 3 words. Congratulations, you passed. The next moment, Wayne suddenly stood up under the surprised eyes of Liao and the little fat man, bent down and held Miaoji's hands with a smile on his face, as if to celebrate her great achievement. Why did you pass this time? This sentence came to the minds of the 2 fat men on both sides of Wayne at the same time. Ah, then I'll do it next. Miaoji looked at Wayne in front of him in confusion, but did not react. Next, you can go back to the dormitory to rest. I will inform you before the mission. Wayne kept smiling and said kindly. Wayne, have you forgotten something? Don't you have to pay to join the team? After Miaoji went out, Liao suddenly whispered in Wayne's ear. Well, the money you paid is enough for us for the time being. Captain Wayne explained without sincerity. Liao was speechless. 2 hours later, the orange light from the setting sun filled the sky, giving the entire school an orange coat. At this time, the team registration office. Captain Wayne, who was originally in high spirits, was lying on the table boredly, staring at his own shadow reflected by the setting sun on the ground in front of him. The little fat man on the left has long been immersed in his own online world. Liao on the right is nodding like a woodpecker. Boom. Liao finally couldn't hold on any longer and fell with his whole face on the table, making a muffled sound. Ouch. Sitting up reflexively, Liao covered his nose and let out a scream. What time is it and no one is here yet? Feeling the soreness coming from his nose, Liao looked at the 2 bored people beside him and asked. Otherwise we'll have to blame that John if we recruit him next time. Captain Wayne said with some embarrassment. The team's first recruitment ended in such a cold manner. Captain Wayne felt that he couldn't bear this grievance. It's all that John's fault. John, who was on the run, didn't know that he was inexplicably charged with causing the team to be unable to recruit people. At this moment, Wayne's shadow on the ground suddenly changed. The head of the original humanoid shadow suddenly began to swell, as if a big lump had grown out of his head. Then the big bag continued to expand, and in just 2 seconds, the big bag had turned into another complete human form. Then, the shadow on the ground suddenly became 3-dimensional, just like a 2-dimensional picture suddenly turned into a 3-dimensional image. A young man with an unattractive appearance appeared in the sight of the three of them. He is about 175 centimeters tall, has black hair and black eyes, and has a very popular face. He was clearly standing in the sun, but at a glance, it seemed as if his whole body was covered with a shadow. My name is Adonis, height 175, weight 122, British. I am here to join you. I have no dreams. The shadow boy looked at the three people in front of him expressionlessly and completed his self-introduction. Quote. Looking at the unfamiliar boy in front of them, Liao and the little fat man began to quickly recall information about each other. He seems to be the one who always stays alone in the corner. The little fat man and Liao looked at each other, seeming to confirm their guesses. Wayne looked at the young man in front of him expressionlessly, without saying a word, but he felt a little uncomfortable in his heart. You've finished saying everything, so what should I ask? Just after Wayne and Adonis looked at each other for a minute, Wayne suddenly stood up again, enthusiastically held each other's hand, and said, "Congratulations, you passed." Quote. Little Fatty and Liao were speechless at the same time. It is good, Adonis answered as Wayne held his hand and shook it. After holding hands and shaking them for 2 minutes, even Wayne felt a little embarrassed. Adonis finally spoke again. When do we act? Call. Wayne breathed a sigh of relief. He finally spoke. As a captain, how can you make your subordinates cooler than you? Of course you can't speak first. Go back, act, inform. After spitting out 3 words quickly, Captain Wayne quickly opened Adonis's hand. The 2 grown men held hands and shook hands for a few minutes. Wayne's shamelessness was a bit unbearable. It is good, Adonis once again answered in 1 word. The whole person suddenly became like a noodle. Flat. Soft. Then it changed from a 3-dimensional image to a 2-dimensional picture again, turning into a dark shadow, blending into the shadows on the side and disappearing. Did he understand what you meant? Looking at Wayne, who said nothing, Liao suddenly asked. I guess not. The little fat man secretly had fun. Then why don't you send him a text message to explain? Suddenly, Wayne turned around and said sadly. Cheating. No matter what you say, the other party only has to say good things. There is no way I can win no matter what. Remember, in your own name. Looking at the little fat man who was about to send a message, Captain Wayne added. Chapter 51. As the last ray of sunlight disappeared from the horizon, Wayne stood up from the bench, moved his somewhat stiff body, and completely gave up on recruiting people. The 3 of them sat for 5 hours today, and finally ended the team's first recruitment meeting by successfully recruiting 2 team members. Let's get ready and tell them to meet at the southwest corner of the academy in 10 minutes. Wayne took out a backpack from the closet and said to the fat man next to him. What do you have in this bag? Liao asked curiously when he saw Wayne take out a school bag he had never seen before from the closet. Don't tell you. Wayne shook his head proudly and walked out of the dormitory first. 10 minutes later. Looking at his squad teammates standing in a row in front of him, Wayne couldn't help but feel a little excited. This is probably the first time I have carried out an operation in the name of a small team since I formed it. After clearing his throat, Captain Wayne took out a piece of paper from the bag behind his back, stood in front of the 4 people and said passionately. Today is the first operation of our team. In the next operation, I need you to do the following 3 things. The first point is to obey the captain's order. The second point is to obey the captain's order. The third point is to obey the captain's order. Quote. Looking with satisfaction at the 4 people below who were listening attentively, Captain Wayne puffed up his chest and continued. You must believe that under the leadership of the great Captain Wayne, the small team is destined to be invincible and invincible. You will continue to improve and grow under the glorious leadership of Captain Wayne. 5 minutes passed like this. So, our goal today is to kill John. Repeat loudly, what is our goal? Quote. Little Fatty, Liao, and Miaoji looked at Wayne silently. Kill John. Adonis shouted. Well, Adonis asked for praise. You 3 should answer quickly. Looking at Adonis with satisfaction, Wayne suddenly felt that although this child was a little talkative, he was still quite reliable at critical times. Kill John. 3 breathless voices came, and Captain Wayne finally nodded with satisfaction. Now, we have to run out secretly without being discovered by the bald professor. With a gesture of action, Wayne turned around and prepared to climb over the wall. Quote. A huge metal figure appeared in front of Wayne, and the two looked at each other in silence for a few seconds. Are you sent by the bald guy to stop us? When did he find out? Wayne said coldly. Quote. I said I was passing by, do you believe it? Colossus looked confused and subconsciously covered his bandaged chest with his hands. Since awakening his superpower, Colossus thought that his body had completely turned into steel. However, after going for a checkup today, the doctor at the infirmary insisted that he had a fracture. He also tied a bandage on him and told him to take a walk and breathe fresh air if he had nothing to do. After dinner, he obediently obeyed the doctor's advice and wandered aimlessly in the school when he suddenly heard a shout from the corner. Then he saw Wayne asking him coldly. Colossus suddenly panicked. A whoosh sound. Wayne suddenly rushed towards Colossus, causing a burst of wind. Looking at Colossus helping to bandage his chest, Wayne's conscience noticed something, walked around the wound, and suddenly appeared behind Colossus. He stretched out his right hand and slashed the back of Colossus' neck with a hand knife. Boom! The tall Colossus instantly fell to the ground and fainted. Come on! Wayne held a fat man in one hand and swung them hard, throwing the two of them over the wall and then jumped over. Meowji turned into the plump orange cat again, and when Wayne was about to stand up, he nimbly jumped onto Wayne's shoulder. And Adonis turned into a black shadow again, blending directly into the shadows beneath Wayne. All members of the team finally completed their first small goal and escaped successfully. Where should we go? Holding a flashlight, Liao staggered through the forest. From time to time, I would be tripped by vines or tree roots on the ground, and I had to always pay attention to whether there were snakes in the grass. The little fat man on the side was no better than Liao. He looked at the orange cat lying on Wayne's shoulder with envy and said, I hacked the street surveillance in the city and didn't find John's whereabouts. I did see Storm and the others. Hey, where is Adonis? Liao suddenly remembered that he had not seen Adonis since he climbed over the wall. The next moment, a darker shadow suddenly appeared in the darkness, and slowly turned into the appearance of Adonis in Liao's eyes. I am always here. Adonis appeared and said something to Liao before blending into the darkness again. Is it possible that John is hiding in the forest? The little fat man tripped over a tree root again, stopped and said to Wayne at the front. It's not impossible. Listening to the 4D surround sound of insects, Wayne also stopped. Their aimless search was too inefficient. Meow. At this moment, the orange cat, which had been napping on Wayne's shoulder, suddenly jumped off Wayne's shoulder and let out a crisp meow. After a while, the buzzing of insects around them suddenly quieted down, and a few rustling sounds came from the grass. Two mice jumped out of the grass behind the little fat man, startling the little fat man. Ha 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 ha, Steven, why are you even afraid of mice? Liao on the side couldn't help but laugh when he saw the little fat man being embarrassed. However, when he turned the flashlight over, he found that the little fat man was looking at him with a pale face. Watch what I do, Liao asked in a low voice, and then he felt something wet and cold wrapped around his neck, and the smile on his face stopped abruptly. In an instant, Liao turned paler than the fat man opposite him, and cold sweat broke out on his forehead. Help, help, Liao whispered tremblingly for fear of angering the snake. The sound was so low that Wayne might not have been able to hear it if his ears hadn't been strengthened. When they came out, the little fat man quietly threatened Liao and said, I heard there are snakes in this mountain. Wayne clearly remembered that Liao was very calm at that time and patted his chest. I caught snakes in Zhejiang when I was a kid. What's there to be afraid of? However, looking at Liao's performance now, Wayne suddenly felt that he was afraid that what he caught when he was a child was a toy snake. However, before Wayne could take action, the orange cat at his feet meowed again. This time the cat's meow seemed less gentle than before, with a hint of warning. After the cat meowed, the snake quickly slid down from Liao's body, crawled in front of the orange cat, waggled its tail, stuck out its tongue and said, "Sisi," twice, as if to explain. At this time, the two mice that came out from the front also crawled tremblingly next to the orange cat and began to chirp. The three of them stared at the strange scene in front of them in stunned silence. Even Liao temporarily forgot to wipe the remaining mucus on his neck. It wasn't until the brightly colored snake and the two big mice left that Wayne and the others realized what they were doing. Are you talking to them? Looking at the chubby orange cat, Wayne was a little surprised. I originally thought that Meowg's ability was just to turn into a cat and act cute, but I didn't expect that Meowg could also communicate with animals. With a meow, the orange cat turned into a petite girl again. Yes, they told me they had seen John, heading west. Meowg replied. Then let's catch up quickly. Nodding his head clearly, Wayne turned around and ran in one direction. However, after running a few steps, he suddenly felt like he was being restrained by an invisible force. East. Adonis emerged from the darkness again, controlling the shadow with one hand to pull Wayne. He reached out and pointed in the opposite direction, with an expression on his face that seemed a little impatient. It's really troublesome to switch between shadow and human form every time you speak. Ahem, let me see what's on the ground here. Well, I made a mistake. Hurry up and catch up with John. Pretending to pull away the grass on the ground, Wayne glanced at the dark soil on the ground, turned around and ran towards the west. In order to increase the team's speed, Wayne could only grab Liao and the little fat man's belts one by one and hold them in his hands. Along the way, snakes, owls, rats and even wild boars kept coming to tip off Wayne and the others, and Wayne and the others seemed to be getting closer and closer to John's location. Through his enhanced vision, Wayne could clearly see the human footprints in the soil. He actually didn't go to New York. Instead, he was hiding in the woods. Looking at the faintly visible fire in the distance, the little fat man said excitedly. Why would he choose to hide in the woods? There are snakes everywhere here at night. At the mention of snakes, Liao shivered subconsciously. Apparently, Liao had not recovered from the fright just now. He couldn't get his bearings, so he got lost. After finally finding the target, Wayne breathed a sigh of relief and deduced seriously. Did you think he was you? Adonis, who was hiding in the darkness behind Wayne and the others, complained in his mind, controlled the shadows to form a palm, and raised the middle finger towards Wayne in front. At this time, John did not notice Wayne and the others who were still some distance away from him. Looking at the bonfire in front of him and the dirty clothes on his body, John's hatred for Xavier School for Gifted Girls rose to a new level again. If it weren't for these guys, why would I be hiding in such a ghost place? Increasing the burning flame again, John thought bitterly. After hurting Bruce at school, John suddenly woke up, and then he was frightened. Although he has many complaints about Professor X, he also knows the character of Professor X and several teachers better. For something like what he committed this time, he didn't know what the punishment would be, so in panic, John chose to escape directly. While everyone's attention was focused on the injured Bruce, John sneakily ran outside alone. There was no obstacle all the way. In order to let the children live a normal life, Professor X did not hire any security guards in the school. After escaping from Xavier School for the Gifted, John felt a little desperate looking at the endless woods outside. When he ran away, because he failed to control the temperature, his mobile phone had already melted into a pile of mud. Without his mobile phone, he could not even determine his location. John, who is only a teenager, has awakened the fire ability, but he is not Mr. Bay, and he does not have any knowledge of wilderness survival. After wandering in the woods for several hours, John relied on his own ability to burn to death several wild animals that tried to attack him. However, until now, he could not find the direction back to New York. While staring at the bonfire in a daze, John suddenly heard a movement in the grass not far away. Turning around, I saw two very eye-catching fat men crawling awkwardly on the grass. After getting up and stepping behind the bonfire, John shouted to the two fat men. Who else is here? Just you two losers. The little fat man and Liao who were walking were suddenly startled. They stopped moving and looked at each other. At the same time, they thought in their hearts, has he found Wayne and Meowg? However, the next second, two fireballs attacked the two of them. After narrowly avoiding the fireball, little Fatty and Liao hid themselves behind a big tree and shouted to John in front. You have been surrounded by the most powerful team in the universe. If you are trapped, we will give you a way to survive. This is what Wayne told them to say. Behind the bonfire, John looked nervously at the surrounding woods and stretched out his hands to lift the bonfire into the air. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the grass behind John, and quickly approached John's back, keeping his hand on John's shoulder. Just as he was about to control it, the fireball floating in the air suddenly exploded, and countless small fireballs rushed towards Wayne. Looking at the orange cat clutching his shoulder, Wayne could only jump back to avoid the fireball in the sky. The fireball did not disappear directly after being thrown into the air. Instead, it condensed again and formed a cylinder, wrapping John in it. Passing the orange cat to the little fat man next to him, Wayne said to John in the flames, "Come out. Come in if you can." John's voice came from the flames. "You come out. You come in. Come out and I'll give you a hand. Come in and I'll let you have 2 legs." Quote, quote. Looking at the helpless John in front of him, Wayne felt that he could not communicate with this lunatic, so he took a step forward, preparing to forcefully break through the flames and catch this lunatic back. However, John seemed to have discovered Wayne's plan while Wayne was taking action. The cylindrical flame split into half instantly. The half of the flame continued to expand in size in the air. Since John gave up restraint on his abilities, he has found that his ability to control fire has improved tremendously. Not only has the temperature of the flame increased, but the amount of flame has also changed dramatically. While at school, he could only control a third of his current flames. John gritted his teeth, cursed Professor. Suddenly, the flames floating in the sky fell towards the 3 people below like heavy rain. And almost all the flames avoided Wayne, and instead flew specifically towards the 2 fat men. Looking at the flames in the sky and John turning around to run away, Wayne struggled for a second and then ran sideways towards the fat man who was standing in a daze, while shouting to Liao, "Second fatty, it's time to eat." Subconsciously swallowing a mouthful of saliva, looking at the flames filling the sky, Liao quickly thought about a question in his mind. If you eat fire, will you be cooked? However, as the flames continued to approach, Liao had no time to think. Anyway, it would be cooked if he didn't eat. At the critical moment, Liao opened his big mouth. This time he used his strength to suck milk, and a strong suction force spread from his stomach to his mouth. The flames that originally attacked the 2 men were instantly pulled and changed their direction of travel, and all flew towards Liao's open mouth. Hiccup. After burping, Liao wiped the cold sweat from his forehead and shouted to everyone with excitement, "I'm fine, I did it." Feeling the warmth coming from his stomach, Liao was so excited that he almost cried. The power that had always been able to only act as a vacuum cleaner finally came into play in this operation, and the flames that filled the sky were solved so easily by himself. At this moment, Liao's heart was extremely swollen. "Where's John? I think I can hit 10 right now." Feeling the surprised eyes of everyone, Liao Hao burst out with anger. Ran. Suddenly, Adonis appeared from the shadows again, glanced disdainfully at the swollen Liao, and silently uttered, "Foodie, why didn't you stop him?" Looking at the raging fire burning in the woods not far away, Liao became a little impatient. After finally discovering his role, he was working hard to prepare for a show. Why did this John escape? Even if he ran away, he actually set fire to it while running. Afraid of heat, Adonis replied matter-of-factly. He is not this fat foodie, he can even eat fire. Although he complained, Liao's performance really blinded everyone's eyes. Even Wayne could not have imagined that Liao could swallow all the flames in one breath. The suction force that appeared this time was several times stronger than the last time he ate paper. "You are so awesome, Erpang." Wayne suddenly walked over to Liao's side and gave a rare compliment to Liao's performance. "If you hadn't been discovered by John in advance, I could have dealt with him by myself." If Liao had a tail, it would probably be in the sky at this moment. "Then eat all these flames." Wayne did not refute, but pointed at the fire scene in front of them that had spread dozens of meters. Quote, "Are you serious?" Liao's face turned pale. "If these are not dealt with, the fire is expected to spread to the school." The little fat man opened the map on his mobile phone in time. Their current location was actually not far from the school. John had been circling around after escaping from the school. Seeing the serious expressions on everyone's faces, Liao's mouth twitched, and then he walked towards the sea of fire ahead with a look of death. Opening his mouth and controlling the different dimension in his stomach, Liao was like a greedy snake, constantly devouring flames everywhere. 10 minutes later, as the last flame entered Liao's mouth, Liao Murin disconnected his stomach from the extra-dimensional space, and swayed behind the chatting people like a soulless puppet. Feeling the movement behind him, Wayne, who was sitting under the tree, looked up. It was seen that Liao did not close his open mouth at this time. His skin was red all over, and white smoke continued to come out of his head. His whole body looked like a steamed prawn. "Why don't you shut up?" the little fat man suddenly asked. Seeing Liao staring blankly ahead, unconsciously stretching out his hands to try to close his mouth, Wayne tried his best to hold back his smile, quickly changed the subject, and asked the little fat man, "Where did John go? If you escape in a straight line, it happens to be New York. Then let's go to New York." Wayne made a decision immediately. The dense trees nearby were all flammable. Even if they caught up with John again in this place, John would use the method of burning the forest to stop them. It would be better to go directly to New York and wait for the enemy. Once again, one by one, he grabbed the little fat man and Liao, who had turned into a steamed shrimp, and accelerated towards New York. The movement here must have attracted the attention of the school, and Colossus should have woken up after such a long time, so Professor X must have known about their private escape. So they not only need to catch John, but also need to carefully avoid the school from arresting them. Wayne was running at full speed along the way. The rough road and dim light could not hinder Wayne's running speed. Although the team was operated by 5 people this time, the actual speed of the team's progress depended entirely on Wayne alone. The little fat man and Liao were all carried in Wayne's hands like goods. Miaochi turned into a fat orange cat and firmly grabbed Wayne's shoulders, while the elusive Adonis hid directly in Wayne's hand, in the shadow. Therefore, although they had no transportation, the team arrived in New York in just 2 hours. "John should still be eating grass in the woods now. Why do you still look like this?" The little fat man holding the street lamp was shocked after vomiting, and suddenly smiled and said to his vomiting friend Liao next to him. Quote. Liao spit out the last bit of stomach water, nodded in agreement, and then rolled his eyes at the little fat man. Although Liao had successfully closed his mouth, his tongue was still numb and he couldn't speak clearly. Although your mouth, stomach, and esophagus are invincible, try to grow your mouth and stand next to the fire for more than 10 minutes. But thinking of John playing alone with a group of snakes in the woods, Liao couldn't help but feel happy in his heart. "I want you to set fire to the tree. Let's go find Tony now." Seeing the 2 fat men slowing down, Wayne suggested. Since he wanted to avoid being hunted by Professor. You must know that when Wayne and Tony first lived together, Professor X, in order to avoid suspicion, would rather entrust S.H.I.E.L.D. to contact Wayne than send mutants there. The cautious professor. Although Wayne understands Professor X's difficulties, he also respects everything he has done for mutants. However, through observation during this period, Wayne felt that Professor. In contrast, Wayne still prefers Tony's statement that some things should be done first and then thought about later. It sounds reasonable, but if you think about it carefully, it is actually reckless. After a while, Wayne and others arrived at the door of Tony's villa. With the presence of the little fat man, Liao, Miaoji, and Adonis did not trigger the villa's defense system. "I'll introduce you to Tony, but don't lose sight of anyone in our team." Looking at the excited Liao, Wayne warned in advance. If Liao behaved so hopelessly in front of Tony, Tony would definitely have to continue taunting his team. With Liao's repeated assurances, Wayne and the others finally entered Tony's villa. "Hi, Pepper." Xiaojiao, who was busy handling company affairs with a tablet in the lobby, was startled by the sudden sound and hurriedly raised his head. After seeing that the person coming was Wayne, he patted his chest with lingering fear. "It scared me to death. Wayne, why did you come back?" Pepper was still frightened by the last attack. Although Tony proudly boasted to him about the various defense systems in the villa, as an ordinary person, the slightest disturbance could still scare her. On mission, where's Tony? Quietly concealing the true circumstances of his return, Wayne shouted towards the hall. "You big shit, come out and pick up the guests. He's not at home, these are." Pepper stood up, greeted everyone politely, and then asked Wayne. "They're my squad." After introducing each other, everyone sat on the sofa in the living room. Feeling the soft sofa under him, Wayne showed an inexplicable smile towards Pepper and teased. "Did Playboy go out at night again?" Tony and Pepper were officially together before Wayne went to Xavier Academy for the Gifted. At this moment, Wayne certainly couldn't let go of such a good opportunity to apply eye drops. He went to help Shield. Rolling her eyes, Pepper began to vent her bitterness at Wayne. Tony seems to have reached some kind of agreement with Shield. The dwarf agent often comes to Tony for help. Such a large organization can't even solve its own affairs. When talking about Shield and Agent Coulson, Pepper didn't hide his displeasure in his words. Okay, he curled his lips with some regret. In fact, after not seeing each other for a while, Wayne still missed Tony. Of course, Wayne would never admit it. After chatting for a while, Pepper went back to his room alone. Before leaving, he signaled to Wayne that he would arrange the rooms for others tonight. Pepper understands the relationship between Wayne and Tony, and she will not be polite to Wayne. Meanwhile, the comatose Colossus in Xavier's Academy for Geniuses finally wakes up. Crunch, crunch, Colossus climbed up from the ground, rubbed his neck, making a sound of metal friction, and then walked towards the school dormitory in a depressed manner. Along the way, Colossus found something strange. There were many students in the college park, and they were talking about something lively. Why did you all come outside? Colossus stopped a familiar boy and asked. Normally everyone should be in the dormitory watching TV or doing other things at this time. In the park at night, there are usually only a few couples hiding in deserted places and whispering. The forest over there was burning just now. I heard that the professor was alarmed. Let's talk together. The boy pointed to the bit of smoke still remaining in the eastern sky and said. The forest was burned. Subconsciously, Colossus remembered the Wayne men who knocked him unconscious, and the strange declarations made by those men to attract him. I'm going to the professor's place. After thinking for a moment, Colossus declined the boy's invitation, turned around and walked towards the professor's office. He felt that this matter was 100% related to Wayne, and he needed to inform Professor X. Please come in. The professor's voice came from the office. Pushing the door open, Colossus said hurriedly without having time to say hello. Professor, Wayne and the others sneaked out. I know. Professor X frowned. He once again ignored Wayne's resistance to his ability today. As one of the bipolar mutants, Professor. It was precisely because of his confidence in his abilities that he subconsciously ignored Wayne after comforting the students this time. Usually after this is handled, the students will stay in their dormitories peacefully until the X-Men are dispatched to handle the matter properly. As soon as he discovered the fire, Professor. At this time, Professor X felt mixed feelings. Fortunately, he understood that the reason for Wayne's secret escape must be to capture the injured John. This proved that Wayne had a certain sense of identification with his fellow mutants and was willing to help mutants. What's worrying is that with Wayne's unreliable temperament and a few students who usually don't stand out, Professor X is a little worried that something unexpected will happen to them. However, the manpower of the college is somewhat insufficient now. After weighing it silently in his mind for a long time, Professor X looked at the bandaged Colossus in front of him and said, How is the wound on your chest? No problem. Although he didn't know what Professor X meant, Colossus still patted the bandaged area on his body vigorously. He could clearly feel that his injury was not serious. The doctors and Colossus in the academy are actually mutants who came in from the same batch, and they have always disliked each other. Today, he was extremely enthusiastic and forced him to wear a bandage. He also kept asking him to go for a walk, saying it would help his recovery. At that time, he was still a little surprised as to why his nemesis was treating him so well today. It wasn't until this afternoon that he was really bored, and when he was walking around the college and felt the students around him talking about the bandages on his body, he finally understood the good intentions of his nemesis. He thought with his iron head and knew that they must be discussing how he was beaten up by a new student. When some students who didn't know why saw the straps on his body, they would ask the classmates around them. Brother, isn't that Colossus? He is a temporary member of the X-Men. Why is he wearing a bandage? Hey, don't you know? Let me tell you, today he was killed by a new student. Amid the discussion among the students, Colossus hurriedly walked towards the less crowded part of the school. While he was thinking about how to regain his position with his archenemy tomorrow, a funny declaration attracted his attention, and Colossus followed the sound and walked in the direction of the declaration. Then, He saw the man who brought him endless humiliation. Then, the man didn't give him a chance to explain and beat him again. Fortunately no one saw it. It seemed that his brain was slightly concussed by Wayne. Colossus' attention was suddenly distracted and he kept thinking about today's events. It was not until Professor X used his ability to shout in his head that he realized. "Sorry, Professor, what did you just say?" Colossus asked with an awkward smile. "I'm going to go out in person, will you come with me?" Professor X once again extended an invitation to Colossus. At the same time, I felt sad silently in my heart. Don't the children nowadays admire me anymore? You must know that the children of Xavier Academy for Geniuses have always regarded Professor X as their idol, and even regard joining the X-Men as an honor. However, at this moment, I personally invited the big Iron Man across from me. I originally thought that he would be so excited that he couldn't help himself. However, after I shouted 3 times, I realized that the other person was actually in a daze. It has to be said that, unknowingly, Wayne successfully made Professor X experience the feeling of being ignored. Of course I can. After being stunned for a moment, Colossus became excited as Professor X originally imagined, smiling like a child weighing several tons. Then, he pulled off the bandages on his body and followed Professor X's wheelchair towards the back of the college. There are fighter jets that they only use during special operations. At this time, in a room in the student dormitory, the boy who had been carrying a camera all day did not go to the park to join in the fun like other students. Instead, he stayed alone on the roof of the school dormitory. It seemed that he had been here for a long time. Looking at a plane that suddenly flew away behind the college, a strange smile appeared on the corner of his mouth, and then a sudden wave of emotion appeared on his body. After the blue wave passed, the originally thin boy began to shrink again. Soon, the boy turned into a female mutant with blue skin all over her body. She turned out to be Professor X and Mystique, an old acquaintance of Magneto. She took out a mobile phone from nowhere and dialed the number. Mystique said to the person on the phone, "Charles has left school." Without waiting for the other party to respond, she hung up the phone and the female mutant turned and walked towards the outside of the school. John continued to move forward in the forest in embarrassment. The forest environment at night was more difficult than during the day. Although he could rely on flames to light up the road ahead of him, in this vast forest, flames could also attract countless mosquitoes. Snapped. Once again, John swatted the big mosquito that landed on his face to death, and then viciously crushed the mosquito's body into pieces. The sweaty John weakly held on to a big tree next to him and was about to take a breath and rest. Suddenly, a big hand appeared from behind and firmly covered John's mouth and nose. John, who was suddenly attacked, was startled and subconsciously reached out to take out the lighter hidden in his pocket. As soon as he moved his hand, he felt his arm being pinched by the person behind him. The heavy force made John want to scream, but the other hand sealed his mouth tightly. "Quiet, kid," a wild voice came from behind John. Feeling that the other party slowly relaxed his strength, John nodded knowingly, indicating that he would be obedient. The next moment, John was violently thrown to the dirt in front of him. Regardless of the dirty wet mud on his face, John quickly turned around. He saw a majestic figure facing him. Through the bright moonlight, John could see that the man's hands had tiger-like claws. He swallowed a mouthful of saliva. At that moment, John almost thought he was going to die. Hastily holding the lighter in his hand, as if the lighter brought him a sense of security, John said to the person opposite, "Who are you?" "Saber-toothed tiger. Magneto asked me to pick you up, follow me closely." Looking at the wary John, the saber-toothed tiger chuckled disdainfully. After explaining his arrival, he turned around and walked in the other direction, as if he didn't want to have too much communication with the weak fellow in front of him. Magneto. The name made John's pupils shrink slightly. This name, which is as famous as Professor X, is of course very familiar to John. Unlike the weak professor, we hope that we can rely on our strength to allow mutants to appear upright on the world stage. After a quick weigh in his mind, John climbed up from the mud on the ground and dragged his tired body to follow the figure in front of him. Compared with Professor, the night passed in a hurry, and the next morning, while still sleeping, Wayne felt a pair of fat hands pulling him around. "Wayne, I found John this morning, in Manhattan. The fat man, who was already fully dressed, was shaking Wayne, who was still dreaming, wildly. During yesterday's operation, Miaoji and Liao both used their abilities to provide help to the team, but due to geographical constraints, he could only act as a flag-waving little brother from behind. Now that he has finally arrived in a metropolis with internet and his home stadium, he has long wanted to give it a try. When did this happen? Wayne, who originally wanted to continue miming for a while, suddenly became energetic when he heard John's name and sat up from the bed. Half an hour ago, I went to call them. Seeing that Wayne had gotten up, the little fat man ran towards the next room non-stop. With one move, Wayne jumped up from the bed. Although Wayne was usually very stubborn, at the critical moment, this salty fish could still turn over. After washing up, Wayne heard a familiar scream coming from next door as soon as he went out, and then a half-open door opposite the living room was suddenly knocked open. A fat orange figure sprang out from inside like lightning. After coming out, he glanced at Wayne who had just gone out, ran straight towards Wayne, hid behind Wayne's legs, and faced the door. The direction grinned and made a hissing sound. Immediately afterwards, the little fat man ran out with an embarrassed look on his face. He glanced at it and stammered a bit to explain to the orange cat hiding behind Wayne. I just wanted to wake you up, I didn't see anything. Seeing Wayne's evil smile, the little fat man couldn't help but feel even more embarrassed. He really didn't see anything. He originally came to wake up Miaoji, but the door opened as soon as he pushed it, and then there was a scream. Before he could realize what was going on, a fat cat stepped on his face jumped out. All right, let's go. Seeing that Liao and Adonis were also ready, Wayne gently scratched the orange cat's neck, then picked up the fat cat and walked downstairs. Originally he wanted to say hello to Pepper, but after searching around and failing to find Pepper, Wayne walked to Tony's garage openly, borrowed a Bentley and drove towards Manhattan. As the richest borough in New York, countless famous companies are gathered in this less than 60 square kilometers of land. From time to time, a luxury car and a supercar pass by on the roadside. So the arrival of Bentley did not attract too many people's attention. After getting off the car, Wayne and others gathered at a round table in a Starbucks. Where is John now? Wayne sat down in the middle and asked while looking at the various office workers in the store. Near New York University, shall we go there now? Seeing John on the phone wearing a peaked cap and walking timidly on the street, the little fat man glanced proudly at Liao next to him. Although Liao, who had eaten a lot of fire last night, made himself very embarrassed, before going to bed, he ran to the little fat man's room to show off his powers. Liao didn't know where he got a lighter. He lit a fire with the lighter and sucked the flames into his mouth, looking intoxicated from time to time. His expression looked like he was taking drugs, and the fat guy next to him, who looked depressed, wanted to call the police and report that someone was doing something illegal here. Seeing the little fat man's face getting darker and darker, Liao became more and more enthusiastic about playing. He ran to the bathroom, opened all the faucets, opened his mouth, and performed a performance of sucking water himself. The little fat man was dumbfounded. I wonder if Liao had seen it. Anyway, the little fat man noticed that when Liao's mouth began to produce suction, the water sucked in was not only the water released from the faucet, but also some water that was originally in the toilet. The little fat man's expression was very exciting when he saw this scene. Do people nowadays treat themselves so hard just to show off? Drink all toilet water. Seeing the little fat man's expression on the verge of losing control, Liao nodded with satisfaction and swaggered back to his room. His satisfied expression seemed as if all the fatigue from today had been washed away. After showing off, go back to your room and sleep. As for why he didn't go to other people's rooms to show off, Liao actually thought about it. But after doing some analysis before coming, Liao discovered that if he went to show off to Wayne, he would definitely be beaten. I can absorb fire and water, but I can't absorb fists. As for Miaoji, a girl is not suitable. As for Adonis, Liao had actually been there a long time ago. However, no matter what Liao smoked or what he said, Adonis always looked at Liao in front of him with a cold face. That expressionless face is just like the expressions of those young talents in my country when they are filming. No matter you are filming a crying scene, a kissing scene or a slapping scene, whether he is eating fire, water or paper. Adonis's face remained absolutely calm, without saying a word, and he quietly watched you show off. Ignoring the exchanges between Liao and the little fat man, Wayne looked ahead silently, suddenly feeling something was wrong in his heart. This uneasiness made Wayne's brows frown unconsciously. You must know that his sixth sense is more accurate than most women. What is wrong? Wayne thought to himself. It must be said that although most of the books Wayne read were not serious books, reading did change Wayne's behavior and habits. In the past, Wayne wouldn't have cared about you. He would just rush up and roll up his sleeves and do it. He wouldn't die anyway, and he would only suffer a few pains. Now, Wayne, who thinks carefully before acting, is more in line with his identity as captain. After all, he now has more responsibilities on his shoulders, and the safety of the players around him largely depends on his decisions. Slowly, Wayne began to try to analyze John's intentions. According to the little fat man's information, John barely rested after coming to New York. He spent most of the night walking to Manhattan, and now he has gone to New York University. What made him so eager? Also, John probably didn't have a mobile phone on him, and Wayne didn't believe that he walked here unconsciously. Is it just because the population here is relatively dense? Could it be that John was so stupid that he didn't dare to use his superpowers because he was worried about the ordinary people around him? I'm not Professor X and those brain-dead X-Men. After thinking for a long time with no clue, Wayne finally gave up thinking and believed in Tony again. There were some things that needed to be done and thought about first. If it fails, it will be Tony's fault. At this time, the little fat man who had finished showing off at Liao couldn't help but feel curious when he saw Wayne staring straight in one direction. Following Wayne's gaze, he saw a beautiful woman who looked like she was mixed race, typing away at the computer on a small table not far from them. The hand placed under the table secretly poked Liao, and the little fat man's eyes signaled Liao to follow Wayne's gaze. As a bad friend, Liao accurately received the information conveyed by the little fat man, glanced at it without any trace, and then looked at the little fat man with a lewd smile. Encouraged by the little fat man's eyes, Liao said to Wayne, "Wayne, you have grown up after all." His thoughts were interrupted, and Wayne looked at the mean Liao with a question mark on his face. "Sometimes, if you like it, just go for it. If it doesn't work, I'll teach you. I'm a man who has been kissed 100 times. Liao lectured Wayne with a profound look on his face, and extended his hand to point at the girl directly opposite Wayne. According to Liao, blind dates are a tradition in their family, and his old-fashioned parents force him to participate in various blind dates every year. So he has a lot of experience in being rejected by girls. The man who was rejected 100 times. Seeing that Miaoji seemed to believe Lao's words, Wayne revealed Lao's true face without mercy. Adonis next to him curled his lips slightly, he almost believed it just now. "Go now and catch John." Without further nonsense, Wayne stood up directly. Before leaving, Wayne glanced at the mixed-race girl subconsciously, and then shook his head. He had no such thoughts now. Not long after, Wayne and the others drove to the vicinity of New York University. He entered the school. After getting off the car, the little fat man looked at his phone and said. Next, Wayne and the others slowly followed John's walking path to the west wall of New York University. Looking at a high wall in front of him, Wayne silently turned his head to look at the fat man leading the way. Quote, "They must have rolled over. None of the cameras around them caught them coming out." Feeling everyone's gaze, the little fat man quickly explained. He also used nearby cameras to determine John's position and direction of travel. However, not all cameras can be connected seamlessly. In some locations where there are no cameras, little fatty needs to rely on nearby cameras to guess the direction of the target. For example, right now, the front camera shows that John seems to be chasing something in a hurry, walking straight in this direction. Look. At this moment, Adonis, who had been silent all this time, suddenly walked towards the wall, wiped his hand from the wall, and then raised his hand in front of everyone. All I saw was a ball of dirt on Adonis's fingers. I said it must have been overturned. The little fat man suddenly said excitedly. "Steve and Meowth stay here." Thinking of John's method of surrounding Wei and rescuing Zhao in the forest, Wayne said to the little fat man. Then he lifted Liao and jumped slightly, turning over. Adonis turned into a shadow again, hiding in the shadows behind Wayne. Climbing over the wall of New York University, a dilapidated old house appeared in front of the three Waynes. "There is such a dilapidated house here," Liao said in surprise as he slowly walked towards the old house with mottled walls. Squeak! Wayne walked in the front and reached out to push open the broken door that could no longer be locked. When he was about to walk in, all the hairs on his body suddenly stood up. Pushing Liao behind him with his backhand, Wayne advanced instead of retreating. He and the dilapidated door were slammed into the arms of the sneak attacker in the room. With a bang sound, this decades-old door finally completed its mission. The attacker failed to make a sneak attack, but was knocked back a few steps by Wayne, and finally fell onto a chair in the room. Only then did Wayne have the opportunity to carefully look at the sneak attacker in front of him. "You are so tall, why do you like to imitate women in doing their nails?" Seeing this sturdy, bearded man actually shaping all 10 of his fingernails into pointed shapes, Wayne's mouth suddenly twitched. "Ow!" Wayne responded with a beast-like roar. This attacker was the saber-toothed tiger who had picked up John last night. Facing Wayne's ridicule, the saber-toothed tiger roared at Wayne, showing his sharp fangs, then stood up from the chair and rushed towards Wayne again. Then he picked up a piece of wood that was scattered on the ground after the gate fell apart. Wayne avoided the saber-toothed tiger's unskilled pounce at a speed faster than the saber-toothed tiger. After dodging the attack, Wayne turned around and stabbed the saber-toothed tiger hard on the back with the piece of wood in his hand. Suddenly, the entire piece of wood entered the saber-toothed tiger's back and came out from the chest under Wayne's huge force. Roar! The pain of being pierced through the body made the saber-toothed tiger roar again. However, this kind of injury that is fatal to ordinary people did not successfully injure the saber-toothed tiger. Instead, it aroused his ferocity. The tiger is the most terrifying when it is angry. The saber-toothed tiger pulled out the wood from his chest and smashed it towards Wayne, who was looking for John. After piercing the saber-toothed tiger's entire body, Wayne subconsciously believed that the enemy had lost its ability to fight, and was about to continue looking for John's voice. Suddenly, a bloody wooden stick struck from behind and hit Wayne hard on the head. Crack! Sound. The stick broke in two instantly. However, it did not cause any substantial damage to Wayne. The small injury even healed as before when the stick broke. Seeing the saber-toothed tiger that he thought had lost its ability charging forward majestically, Wayne suddenly lowered his body and pressed his shoulder against the saber-toothed tiger's armpit by taking advantage of his short height. Suddenly, Wayne grabbed saber-toothed tiger's arm with both hands. Suddenly, Wayne discovered that the wound where saber-toothed tiger had been stabbed by him had stopped bleeding. Before he had time to think about it, Wayne threw saber-toothed tiger out the door with a throw over his shoulder. Wayne wasn't sure if saber-toothed tiger was the only one in the house, so he hoped to move the battlefield to an open space outside to avoid being attacked by John the Fool. "Who are you?" Following out of the old house, Wayne looked at the rugged man in front of him and asked. Before this, the only mutants that Wayne knew about had the ability to heal themselves, Wolverine and Deadpool. Now that a mutant with self-healing suddenly appeared, Wayne couldn't help but feel a little awkward. After all, mutants have all kinds of strange abilities. Wayne has been in school for so long and has yet to find two people with the same abilities. So far, counting himself, there are about 4 people with self-healing abilities. Only orphans are valuable. If there are many people with the same ability, how can he take on jobs and make a lot of money? Saber-toothed tiger, remember this name, boy, and I will twist your head off. The saber-toothed tiger rolled quickly on the ground, landing on all 4 hands at the same time, like a wild beast preparing to catch the prey in front of him. However, the next second, the saber-toothed tiger who was about to launch a surprise attack suddenly found that his whole body was wrapped in an invisible force. It was Adonis, who had been hiding in Wayne's shadow, who took action. A dark shadow suddenly separated from Wayne's shadow and quickly transformed into a human form. His right hand still maintained the black shadow. A black line directly connected to the shadow of the saber-toothed tiger. Before that, except for Wayne, Liao and Fatty only knew that Adonis had the ability to transform between shadows and people. Only Wayne had experienced the feeling of being bound once in the forest, but Captain Wayne would not share his embarrassing things with everyone. Therefore, Liao on the side looked at the scene in front of him and couldn't help but feel a little strange. He quickly picked up his mobile phone and pointed it at the stalemate between the saber-toothed tiger and Adonis. This time I took out my mobile phone not to take pictures, but to broadcast it in real time. As for who to broadcast it to, of course it was the little fat man in Meowji hiding behind the wall. He had no offensive abilities anyway, and Wayne's purpose in asking him to come over was entirely to act as a firefighter and prevent John from setting fires everywhere. You and John are in the same group. Seeing that the saber-toothed tiger seemed temporarily unable to move, Wayne continued to ask. The stupid guy in front of him didn't seem to be very smart. Wayne felt that he should be able to extract more information with his wit. Staring at Wayne fiercely, the saber-toothed tiger gritted his teeth and continued to exert force. He already felt that the boy who restrained him seemed a little helpless. As long as he exerted more force, he could regain his freedom. Quote. Seeing the saber-toothed tiger minding his own business competing with Adonis, Wayne scratched his head in embarrassment. How can you use your intelligence when a stupid person ignores you? After thinking for a moment, Wayne turned towards the roadside and picked out a large foxtail grass from the weeds on the roadside. Then he walked straight towards the immobile saber-toothed tiger and stretched out the dog's tail grass he had just picked. Wayne imitated the way ordinary people teased their pet cats, shaking the grass in the saber-toothed tiger's face and said, "Good boy, please tell me which organization you are from and why you got involved with John." Roar. After Wayne shook the dog's tail grass for a minute, the saber-toothed tiger finally got rid of Adonis's restraints and viciously pounced towards Wayne in front of him. On the other side, when Adonis, who was sweating profusely, fell down, he was supported by Liao on the side in time. Bang! Wayne's hand holding the dog's tail grass instantly clenched into a fist and punched the saber-toothed tiger in the face. Just as he was halfway down, the saber-toothed tiger's momentum came to an abrupt halt, and he was punched back to the ground at a faster speed. Why do you have to be beaten? Wayne shook off the dog's tail grass in his hand and became a little annoyed. Can't you just talk nicely? In order to obtain information, I coaxed you amiably for so long without even looking at your ugly face. I was so close to you and gave you such face. You would yell without saying a word. You yelled at me. Before saber-toothed tiger could stand up again, Wayne quickly rushed forward and hit saber-toothed tiger in the chest with his knee. Then a hand grabbed his hair and threw him back again with force. You yell at me again. Throwing away the handful of hair he had just pulled from the saber-toothed tiger's head in disgust, Wayne's fist fell on the saber-toothed tiger again. While fighting, he vented. You roar, you can't beat me, yet you dare to yell at me. Boom, boom, boom. Wayne's fist was like a foundation-pounding machine, hitting the saber-toothed tiger continuously, non-stop, and heavily, smashing the concrete floor beneath them to pieces. Although the saber-toothed tiger has the ability to heal itself, it gradually began to be unable to sustain itself under Wayne's violent attacks. The fists that were still resisting gradually softened, and his eyes began to collapse. At this moment, a flame suddenly burst out of the second-floor window of the old house, heading straight towards Wayne below. Liao, who was concentrating on the real-time broadcast, reacted suddenly and opened his mouth reflexively. The flames obediently changed direction halfway through the flight and rushed straight towards Liao's mouth, as if he was a child who had found his way home. However, just when Wayne wanted to continue punching, a long unknown object suddenly shot out of the window and accurately wrapped around Wayne's half-raised arm. What the hell is this? Looking at the unknown object wrapped around his arm that smelled fishy and was still covered in mucus, Wayne suddenly felt nauseous. I wanted to use my other hand to peel this thing away, but I couldn't do it looking at this disgusting thing. Grabbing one of the saber-toothed tiger's claws, Wayne was about to cut off the disgusting unknown object with his claws, when suddenly the unknown object moved again and pulled Wayne back. Like pulling Wayne through the window again. Wayne was caught off guard and was pulled up, but the moment he stood up, Wayne's right foot suddenly kicked hard at the saber-toothed tiger that was already lying on the ground. The saber-toothed tiger, which had lost the ability to resist, was kicked into the air again by Wayne, and shot straight into the wall behind it like a football. Boom! With another sound, Sabretooth's head successfully crashed through the wall of New York University, becoming the first mutant to have his head printed on New York University. With his neck stuck in the wall, the saber-toothed tiger opened his eyes and saw a fat young man with an equally fat orange cat holding a mobile phone and looking at him in confusion. Roar. Stretching out his sharp fangs, the saber-toothed tiger roared fiercely at the young man in front of him, mixed with the anger that he had just been beaten. You must know that in normal times, as long as a saber-toothed tiger shows its fangs and roars at ordinary people, the latter will be scared to death. The little fat man and Meowji, who were leaning against the wall and nervously watching the fighting scenes on their mobile phones, were really startled by the sudden head. Especially when the saber-toothed tiger's ferocious beast-like roar sounded, the originally timid Meowji was immediately stimulated. Meow. In excitement, the orange cat jumped up from the little fat man's shoulder, stretched out his little paws and scratched at the saber-toothed tiger's head. Don't underestimate Meowji's claws. Although the orange cat transformed by Meowji looks plump, in addition to being able to communicate with animals, its main function is to be the team's mascot. But in fact, this orange cat's fat body contains the same power as a normal adult. The orange cat's panic and scratching became the last straw to defeat the saber-toothed tiger. The saber-toothed tiger, which was already unable to hold on, finally rolled its eyes and completely lost consciousness after being hit hard again. The famous saber-toothed tiger among mutants, Wolverine's brother, finally fell to the paws of a fat orange cat in frustration today. Just when the cat meowed and roared, Wayne used the recoil of the kick to rush back. When his feet touched the ground, Wayne retracted his hands into his sleeves and grabbed the pair of clothes through his clothes. The slimy unknown object was pulled with both hands. Boom! A figure was pulled out by Wayne from the second-floor window of the old house. At this time, Wayne finally understood what the unknown object that attacked him was. He loosened his hands at lightning speed and watched the person he threw out put his tongue back into his mouth like a toad. Then he looked at the mucus remaining on his clothes. Wayne felt nauseated for a while. Why are you people so perverted? If you're not imitating women's manicure, you're just licking it everywhere with your tongue. Call out. The tongue shot towards Wayne again. Faced with Wayne's ridicule, the other party obviously wanted to have a real verbal battle with him. Seeing the wet tongue attack again, Wayne didn't dare to reach out and catch it directly this time. Glancing at the saber-toothed tiger that made no further action after roaring, Wayne temporarily put aside his worries about Fatty and Meowth. The reason why he reached out decisively and pulled out that disgusting tongue just now was because he was worried about the safety of the little fat man and the others. Now that they were out of danger, then I don't have to touch that disgusting thing anymore. After understanding the situation at the scene, Wayne turned around and ran in the direction of Liao. Second Fatty, eat this disgusting tongue. While constantly dodging the attacks of his tongue, Wayne shouted towards Liao. Quote. Liao, who was originally watching the live broadcast on his mobile phone, turned pale instantly. A tongue with drool that you don't even want to touch, and now you want me to eat it? Don't come here. Seeing Wayne approaching him while dodging in a roundabout way, Liao was so frightened that he dropped his cell phone and Adonis, who was temporarily out of power, and ran in the opposite direction. God bless you, it's all Wayne's fault, not mine. Before escaping, Liao subconsciously looked back at Adonis, who was slumped on the ground, and silently prayed for him in his heart. Adonis, who was pushed away inexplicably, looked at the fat figure flying away with a confused face, and for the first time a trace of despair appeared on his expressionless face. He thought that he would be injured or even die when he went on a mission, but he never expected that he would be licked to death by his tongue. However, Adonis's despair did not last long. As Liao left, Wayne also began to change the direction of his running. Watching Wayne fly past him less than a meter away with his tongue, he continued to run in the direction of Liao. Adonis breathed out subconsciously and wiped the cold sweat from his forehead. At that moment, he almost felt that he was about to be licked to death in such humiliation. Picking up the mobile phone that Liao had thrown aside, Adonis pointed it at the fleeing Liao and continued to broadcast live. Looking at the figure who was desperately escaping, Adonis said the longest sentence in more than 10 years. You're done, you big fat man. He should be talking about Liao Bar. Inside the courtyard wall, the little fat man who was leaning against the wall watching the live broadcast shivered when he heard Adonis's vicious words and asked the orange cat beside him. Meow. Although Liao had used all his energy to run hard, his fat body became a burden to him at this time. Although Wayne had to dodge attacks while moving forward, with his super fast movement speed, Wayne caught up with Liao, who was fleeing in front of him in a few seconds. The moment he passed Liao Kuang, Wayne grabbed Lao's shoulders with both hands, turned his whole body back, and hid behind Liao Kuang. Wayne looked at the tongue that quickly caught up behind him and laughed proudly. Receive. Looking at the long tongue flying straight towards him, Liao twisted his fat body, trying to get rid of Wayne's control. However, after giving it a try, Liao was disappointed to find that Wayne's seemingly weak hands were like two iron claws, holding him firmly in front. Looking at the tongue getting closer and closer and the saliva splashing around it, Liao seemed to be able to smell the bad breath that followed. With his eyes widened, Liao opened his big mouth with determination. The two people watching the live broadcast on the other side could even see two lines of tears flowing from Lao's eyes at this moment. The familiar suction force appeared in the air, and the originally fast tongue rushed toward Lao's mouth at an even faster speed under the guidance of the suction force. When it was about to touch Lao's mouth, the tongue seemed to have entered another space, instantly becoming smaller and being sucked into an unknown dimension. Liao, who originally looked determined, suddenly came to his senses at this moment and breathed a sigh of relief in his heart. Yes, I don't really eat my tongue. When Liao uses his superpower, his mouth becomes the entrance to another dimension. Although the things he inhales seem to enter Lao's mouth, they actually do not come into contact with his mouth at all. However, from the outside, the picture is more realistic. Except that Wayne couldn't see the specific situation because he was hiding behind Liao. Both Adonis, who was broadcasting live on his mobile phone, and the other two melon-eating viewers were stunned to see this horrifying scene. As Lao's tongue continued to be eaten into his mouth, Lao's expression changed, and he seemed to show a smile. I accept. Subconsciously swallowing a mouthful of saliva, the little fat man refreshed his view of Liao again in his heart. The last time he saw Liao drinking toilet water without changing his expression, the little fat man had an inexplicable admiration for Liao in his heart. Now looking at Liao eating such a disgusting tongue, he actually smiled. The little fat man had to lament that Liao was indeed a leader in the foodie world. If he made a show in the future, what would he do to Mr. Pei? Even Adonis, who had been itching his teeth with hatred just now, felt turbulent in his heart when he saw this scene. For such a perverted person, how should I retaliate against him in the future? I'm afraid this person has some perverted hobbies. When the time comes, wouldn't my revenge against him satisfy his perverted hobbies? As Lao's tongue continued to be sucked into another dimension, the toad-like person suddenly panicked. His tongue is long, but he can't bear to eat like this. His tongue was almost gone, but the fat man opposite him still had an unfinished smile on his face. Not long after, it seemed that the length of the tongue had reached its limit, and the toad-like person was pulled into the air by the tongue. Like a fish being caught, it followed the tongue and flew towards Liao. Wayne, who had been hiding behind Liao, felt relieved when he saw this scene. It seemed that this pervert could no longer flick his tongue around. Wayne released his grip on Lao's hands and rushed out from behind Liao. Feeling the invisible suction coming from Lao's mouth, Wayne couldn't help but glance at Liao. The suction force this time is obviously stronger than when I was at school. Although Lao's ability has been strengthened, this suction power still failed to have much impact on Wayne. When the toad-like man was about to hit Liao, Wayne, who had been waiting for a long time, punched him. Hiss. With Liao closing his mouth and a punch from Wayne's fist. The originally long tongue was cut off instantly, and the owner of the tongue was smashed to the ground, twitching on the ground holding his mouth. This time the war of words ended with Lao's victory. Looking at the unconscious figure lying on the ground, Liao just wanted to complain to Wayne when he suddenly felt a chill on his back. Subconsciously turning around, Liao suddenly saw Adonis, who had regained his strength, walking towards him expressionlessly. That was an accident just now, Liao said with a flattering smile. Seeing that Adonis was still looking at him coldly without saying a word. Just when Liao was about to put the blame on Wayne, he suddenly felt the ground shake violently. Looking back, Wayne was stepping on the man who fell to the ground with one foot. A circle of spider web-like cracks with a radius of 1 meter were scattered on the ground, and the man had already stopped twitching. He insulted me and didn't answer my questions. Seeing Liao and Adonis looking over at the same time, Wayne quickly explained. After spending a long time thinking and getting into two inexplicable fights, Wayne originally wanted to extract some useful information from the stupid-looking saber-toothed tiger, but the uncooperative, stupid guy was already lying there without making any movement. So Wayne could only bend down again, patted the toad-like mutant in front of him, and asked in a very soft voice. "I called you Toad. You attacked me. I don't blame you. Now tell me where John is and what organization you are." As a result, after waiting for a long time, the toad continued to twitch on the ground, as if it had not heard Wayne's question. Smiling awkwardly, Wayne leaned into his ear and asked again. However, this time the toad seemed to want to answer Wayne. He finally stopped twitching, turned his head towards Wayne, opened and closed his mouth a few times, but did not say a complete sentence. Instead, a mouthful of bloody spit accidentally spattered during the process. If Wayne hadn't been able to dodge quickly, the bloody spit would have flown into his face. Two people asked in succession to no avail, and Wayne suddenly became angry. The stupid guy in front who loved doing his nails not only refused to answer the question, but even yelled at him. Now this tongue-wagging toad not only refused to answer the question, but also spat at him. Although he still didn't know which organization these two people belonged to, Wayne had already realized that the style of this organization was very tough. Even after being beaten like this, he would rather die than surrender. Therefore, Wayne had no choice but to carry forward his adult virtues and realize his idea of death to protect the organization. After taking a look at the toad that was still staring at death, a few drops of cold sweat broke out on Lau's forehead. He immediately gave up the idea of blaming Wayne, looked at Adonis and said, "Actually, I have always known that the target of the tongue is me. Being with me will only hurt you, so I can only lead the tongue away first." As he talked, Liao became more and more confident, and it seemed that he already believed this statement. Wasn't his tongue eaten by Liao? At this moment, the little fat man who had just climbed over the wall with difficulty interrupted. Quote. Wayne's mouth suddenly twitched. It seems that the person who was spitting just now seemed to be using a few times. He spit on me anyway. However, after thinking about it, Wayne still felt that this matter had nothing to do with the tongue. What does your lack of tongue have to do with your spitting? Can't you speak without spitting? Before Wayne could think of any more reasons, suddenly, Wayne's ears twitched slightly, and he turned around and looked into a small alley not far away. An old man with gray hair wearing a strange helmet was slowly walking towards them. Behind the old man was John, the target of their team's operation. "Stickman John, you finally dared to come out," Wayne said to the somewhat embarrassed John. Then he looked at the old man walking in front of John with some caution. For some reason, Wayne was able to detect a hint of danger from this old man. It's not the kind of early warning threat you'd expect from a pistol pointed at you or a saber-toothed tiger that just attacked you. This is a way, as if the twilight old man in front of him can cause real harm to himself. Wayne had felt this feeling before when Professor X activated his superpower. "My name is Pyro, Wayne." Looking at the corpses on the ground and the saber-toothed tiger stuck on the wall, John clenched his fists tightly. You must know that when he faced the saber-toothed tiger, he had no ability to resist at all, even though the saber-toothed tiger was attacking by surprise. But John could still clearly feel the gap between him and Wayne. This made him very unwilling, but there was nothing he could do. "Finally meeting you, Wayne." The silver-haired old man suddenly spoke. The tone of his speech was like a friendly greeting between an elder and a junior, and there was no hostility as Wayne imagined, even if Wayne killed one of them. "You are." Although the person on the other side did not seem to be hostile, Wayne still did not dare to let down his guard at all. After all, he had just killed the other person. "You should have heard of me from Charles, although the version you heard must have been his vilified version." The silver-haired old man looked very relaxed, as if the body between them was an ordinary stone. "Magneto." After a long silence, Wayne asked. "Yes, I am Magneto. I don't know how Charles introduced me to you." Magneto seems very curious about how his old friend Professor X would describe himself to Wayne. "He said that you had worked together on Mutantkind, but that the two of you had drifted apart due to differences of opinion." Wayne answered Magneto's question honestly. Although he was very confident in his abilities, the huge sense of threat coming from Magneto and Magneto's name as a mutant bipolar made Wayne very afraid of him. Maybe his team will be in trouble this time. Although he can't die, Wayne needs to ensure the safety of his team members. Therefore, without being able to figure out Magneto's purpose for the time being, Wayne could only continue to make excuses with him. Anything else? Magneto smiled and continued to ask. Based on his understanding of Professor X would not just say this. Obviously, Wayne was afraid that he would do something to him, so he omitted all the bad descriptions. This also proves that his old friend has successfully made Wayne a little defensive and resistant to him. Just tell me, I have no ill intentions towards you. Looking at the hesitant Wayne, Magneto continued to ask. In fact, when he got the news about Wayne, he was already one step behind Professor. And Magneto, who has always been on the opposite side of ordinary people, has no organization willing to help him. So by the time he learned about Wayne, Professor X had already been in contact with Wayne. Before, Magneto didn't know why Professor X valued a mutant who was only a teenager so much. So Mystique could only be sent to Xavier School for the Gifted to collect some information about Wayne. It wasn't until Mystique sent over the video of the battle between Wayne and Colossus that Magneto saw Wayne's extraordinary fighting power for the first time. You must know that Wayne has just awakened, and when he and Professor X first awakened, they were probably no match for Wayne. And today's failure of the saber-toothed tiger and the toad better confirmed this point. Regardless of the variety of strange abilities awakened by mutants, some abilities seem very powerful, but no matter how powerful the abilities are, they still need to be controlled and used by people. Although there are few mutants with powerful abilities, they are not very rare. However, the mutants who can perfectly display and use these abilities are really rare. As a bipolar mutant, he is different from Professor X. His Brotherhood needs to absorb more powerful mutants to help him realize his wishes. Use force to force humans to recognize the status of mutants. If Wayne can join the Brotherhood's combat effectiveness will definitely increase a lot. Moreover, Wayne is still very young and has the power of immortality, which means that when one day he dies of old age or dies in battle, there will still be a powerful mutant who can lead the Brotherhood to continue fighting. Therefore, Magneto is determined to win Wayne. Can I leave as soon as I tell you? My girlfriend is still waiting for me to come home for dinner. Seeing Magneto's increasingly fiery eyes, Wayne subconsciously hinted to him that he didn't like men. Although he didn't know what the other party's purpose was, Wayne didn't want to stay here anymore. Now it is obvious that John has defected to Magneto, so the team will definitely not be able to complete this mission. Therefore, it is better to leave the matter of capturing John to the bald professor and his X-Men. Now he just wants to return to the academy and continue to be a salty fish. Where can you get a girlfriend? Liao whispered behind Wayne. However, no one paid attention to this fat man's thoughts at this moment. The focus of the entire audience was on the figures of the old man and the young man at the front of both sides. Although the word, aura, usually sounds illusory, at this time, no matter whether it was Fatty, Meow, Adonis or John, they had to admit it. During the seemingly normal conversation between the old man and the young man, the aura emanating from them made their breathing quicken. Don't you want to know about the organization that studies mutants? Seeing that Wayne didn't seem to like his approach, Magneto changed his strategy. Suddenly hearing the word organization from Magneto's mouth, Wayne's eyes immediately tightened and he stared directly at the smiling Magneto in front of him. Wayne had to admit that the other party had indeed grasped his pain point. How much do you know? Although Wayne has been sitting in front of the college every day for the past 2 months, reading books and basking in the sun every day, seemingly living a carefree life. But this does not mean that Wayne has forgotten the organization that once brought him countless tortures. Although he had killed Gina and Wade had cut off one of Francis's hands, Wayne and their hatred would never be resolved as long as that organization existed in the world. He just kept waiting for Professor. Didn't Charles tell you? Seeing Wayne's increasingly serious expression, the corners of Magneto's mouth turned up slightly. Judging from Wayne's various experiences along the way, Wayne is a man who must avenge himself. Since ancient times, there has been only one way to retaliate against the enemy, and that is the blood of the enemy. Wayne was very similar to him in their attitude towards the enemy, which Professor X must have been able to discover. Therefore, Magneto determined that even if Professor X knew some information about the organization, he would never tell Wayne because the organization involved government agencies. Judging from the way his naive old friend dealt with things, he must have hoped to solve this problem through weak social means. However, this is one of the reasons why Magneto is so disgusted with Professor X. But now, Professor, it seems that he did not tell you. If I remember correctly, he should know more about these things than me. Looking at Wayne with a gloomy face, Magneto continued. Actually, these organizations have two purposes for studying mutations. One is to completely eliminate the mutant population, and the other is to use us as weapons to gain more power. And most of these organizations belong to government agencies, such as the United States. Wayne nodded. Little Fatty had told him a long time ago that when Little Fatty first awakened his powers, he accidentally entered a website, and his relevant information was recorded on the website, and the military was also involved, in one thing. However, the United States is not a whole, there are also many factions in it, and Wayne does not know who is involved in this matter. Without understanding the situation, it was impossible for him to kill all the generals in the United States. There is a scientist named Stryker in the military who has been dedicated to studying mutants all year round. He has many works, the most famous of which is Wolverine. You should have heard of it. Where is he? According to my investigations over the years, he is. Magneto suddenly stopped mid-sentence, looked up at the empty sky not far away, and stretched out his hand. There was a harsh sound of metal friction, and a plane appeared in the sight of several people. However, the plane that suddenly appeared seemed to be out of control. As Magneto's outstretched hand slowly turned, the plane seemed to be squeezed invisible, and the metal outside was slightly deformed. That's enough, Eric. John, who had been hiding behind Magneto, suddenly stretched out his hand, grabbed Magneto's neck, and shouted loudly. Tiger. Seeing John's sudden action, Liao said subconsciously. Liao had always thought that John was a little ruffian who bullied others and was afraid of being bullied. Especially after he was able to swallow fire, Liao looked down on John even more. He never expected that he would dare to challenge Magneto. You know, when Wayne just faced Magneto, he was a little cautious. He's afraid he took the wrong medicine. The little fat man behind agreed. Just as the two were about to start discussing how John died, they were surprised to find that Magneto obediently lowered his hand and stopped destroying the plane. And he ignored John's hand on his neck, and instead quietly waited for the plane that appeared out of thin air to land. As the plane lands, the cabin opens. Professor. Behind him, Cyclops, Storm, Chin, and Colossus were wearing X-Men uniforms and lined up neatly behind Professor X. Professor. The bipolar mutants finally met again in the center of New York after many years. If this scene was seen by some organizations, it would probably cause another disturbance. Looking at his old friend whom he had not seen for many years, Professor X was about to speak when a voice suddenly interrupted him. Where did you buy these clothes? In fact, Wayne also knew that it was not good to interrupt at this time, but he really couldn't help it. Looking at the X-Men coming off the plane, they were dressed in uniform combat uniforms. Then look at the people behind you wearing colorful clothes and different body shapes. However, he looked at Magneto who was wearing a weird helmet and John who was covered in dirt behind him, as well as the toad that just stuck out his tongue and the stubbled man with fingernails. Wayne suddenly felt that he really needed to order a cooler team uniform. In the future, no matter whether you can beat the opponent or not when you go on a mission, at least when you hit the stage, you can overpower the opponent in terms of momentum. This is an era where appearance is all about appearance. The previous battles have proven this. Just because I am handsome, and Magneto's side is full of crooked melons and cracks, so now I am ugly and lying on the ground with dead and wounded wounds. The handsome one can chat and laugh with the other party's boss, and he won't even be angry if his younger brother is killed. Suddenly, Wayne understood why Magneto was so enthusiastic about him. Looking at Magneto aside, Wayne thought silently in his heart. I hope everyone will support it and subscribe more.